It is 5 a.m. I'm Jay Harper with your top stories. We'll get you that weekend weather forecast and our first traffic report of the morning here in just a bit. Well, President Trump's trip to China is over, and he's now on his way back to the U.S. During the trip, the president says China agreed to buy more soybeans and order hundreds of planes from Boeing. We hear now from ABC's Lionel Moise.
Analysts say a key moment of the summit was China's warning to the U.S. about Taiwan, saying if the issue is handled improperly, it could lead to conflict. As for whether China pressures its ally Iran to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, many observers say China is in no rush to get involved.
Sources now tell ABC News that President Trump is prepared to drop a multi-billion-dollar lawsuit he filed against the American government. In exchange, a new fund would be set up. ABC's Catherine Falder spoke about it with the ABC podcast called Start Here.
This had to do with this $10 billion lawsuit that Trump essentially filed against himself. He filed it earlier this year. It was in relation to the 2019 leak of his tax returns. And when he did this at the time, a lot of his critics said, wait a second, could this go into settlement discussions, settlement negotiations? This would essentially be him paying himself.
Instead of going forward with the lawsuit, the proposed settlement would see the creation of a $1.7 billion fund that would compensate people who say they were unfairly targeted by the Biden administration. Those seeking claims could potentially include people arrested in connection with the January 6th attack on the Capitol. A deadly small plane crash in New Mexico. ABC's Trevor Alt has details.
A medical transport plane crashed in the mountains of New Mexico, leaving 4 people dead and igniting a wildfire. Authorities say the small propeller plane took off from Roswell, carrying 4 crew members and medical personnel around midnight. It lost communications, vanishing from radar, then crashed.
Federal officials are on the scene investigating. We now turn to the market numbers report. It's brought to you by Beacon Capital Management. They're online at beaconcm.com. Here's Jim Ryan.
The Standard & Poor's and the NASDAQ Composite set new records Thursday, each rising more than 0.75%. The Dow Jones came very close to an all-time high of its own, adding 370 points to finish the session just over 50,000. Iran says 30 ships, including oil tankers, passed through the Strait of Hormuz yesterday, but it wasn't enough to affect worldwide crude prices. Brent crude was sitting right around $107 a barrel overnight. Electric vehicles have zapped the bottom line at Honda. The car maker reported its first annual loss ever, $2.7 billion. Honda points to the upheaval of the EV market in the United States and on-again, off-again U.S. tariffs. Texas dominated the Census Bureau's latest population rankings with all 5 of the nation's fastest-growing cities. The Dallas suburb of Salina topped the list, growing by 24.6% from mid-2024 to mid-2025.
Let's take a look at the stock futures before the opening bell. The Dow, it's down 368. The S&P down 86 and a quarter. The NASDAQ, it's down 492. That's the latest news. Traffic and weather are on the way. I'm Jay Harper, WTN News. Well, we do have some traffic issues already here at 5:05 in the morning. First of all, we've got a crash in West Nashville. This is I-40 eastbound near exit 205. And there are some road work delays going on up in Sumner County. This would be 65 southbound between exits 104 and 98. It's kind of stop-and-go traffic up there due to some lane closures and the construction. We'll have your traffic every 10 minutes this morning on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Hey, good morning to you, everyone. It is 6 minutes past the hour of 5 o'clock on this Friday, May 15th. I am not Dan Mandis. Brian Wilson in the chair today for Dan, who is going off to be a grandpa yet again. Grandpa Mandis, headed up to be with his daughter. And so I'm filling in on this Friday, which is really a Bri-Day. I like that, by the way. I thought that was good. It's not Friday. It's Bri-Day. Brian Wilson in for Dan Mandis on Nashville's Morning News. Busy morning and a crisp morning for you if you're getting up and around. I don't want to tell you, it's a bit chilly outside. I've got 48 degrees right now in Nashville, Tennessee, headed up to a high today of 81. And by the way, if you got any plans for the weekend, it looks like it's going to be a really nice weekend with temperatures in the mid to upper 80s. That's going to feel good. That's going to feel good. Jay Harper is in the newsroom. Jay, I don't know if you're there, but
yes,
good morning
sir.
to you.
Hey, Brian.
It's good to hear your voice. Everything going well with you, Jay?
Yeah. Just got done doing a baseball softball tournament, 30 games in 8 days.
Wow.
So I'm happy to be
left. I don't know how
I'm happy to be here getting some rest.
Yeah, if doing the news in the morning is rest, you must have had a pretty hectic few days.
Yeah, but it was good.
And of course, Sam is pushing the blinky buttons. Good morning to you, Sam.
Good morning, Brian. Thank you for the credit on the title.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. Bri-Day. Well, I guess we'll start off this morning with the discussion of what's going on, what happened, rather, with the president's trip to China. And I know you say, well, how does that impact my life? Well, it really does, because there's so much going on in the world right now that impacts your daily life. For example, the price of gasoline that you put in your car, which this morning, Tennessee averaged $4.12 a gallon. This visit to China, this high-level diplomatic trip, this summit between really, I think, the last two leaders of superpowers in the world, China and the United States. I don't think Russia is a superpower so much anymore, although they do have nuclear weapons. But I really think that when you talk about superpowers today, since what we have seen with Russia and Ukraine is that, they're not the superpower everybody thought they were. They can't even take Ukraine. So that, are they really a superpower? So you got President Xi, you got President Trump having a big summit, 2-day affair. There's a lot of different readouts on that today. The president is on his way back to the United States, but he did sit down with Sean Hannity of Fox and talked about his thoughts about President Xi and what he hopes that would happen here. Here is President Trump talking to Sean Hannity.
I think he's a warm person, actually, but he's all business. He's there's no games. There's no talking about how nice the weather is. Oh, let's look at the stars. Let's look at the sun. No, he's all business, and I like that. I mean, that's a good thing. No games. I say it about him, and I could say it about some, not as complimentary, frankly, for the most part. But I say about him that if you went to Hollywood and you looked for a leader of China to play a role in a movie,
central casting.
He's central casting. You couldn't find a guy like him. Even his physical features, he's tall, very tall, and especially for this country, because they tend to be a little bit shorter.
Well, I got to tell you, having been to China a couple of times and being 6'4", I did notice that right away, that I was a full, foot and a half taller than most of the people that I encountered on the streets of China. So it is something that you can't help but observe. Trump also, while he was talking to Sean Hannity, talked about Iran, and then brought it back to what the discussions that he and President Xi had with regard to Iran. Pretty interesting stuff there. President says, look, if we want to, we can go back in and really mess up Iran even further. But it's not his inclination, I would guess, to do that.
It would take one plane, 1 minute. That's all it would take. When you do that, you start off, that's a big statement to do that. Now, you also have bridges, you also have electric plants, which I think in many ways are worse, because you can get the oil open faster than you can build a new bridge or build a new electric plant. But these guys should make a deal. I mean, only crazy people would not make a deal, but they should make a deal. And President Xi would like to see a deal made. He would like to see a deal made. And he did offer, he said, if I can be of any help at all, I would like to be of help. Because,
he did say that.
Yeah, he did say that. And look, anybody that buys that much oil has obviously got some kind of a relationship with him. But he said, I would love to be of help. If I can be of any help whatsoever, he'd like to see the Hormuz Strait open. He said, if I could be of any help whatsoever, I would like to help.
What has complicated things probably the most is the top three-tier leadership is wiped out.
It's gone.
Now you have a fractured leadership.
Yeah, but I think we have people that are leaders. I think they're much better than, I think they're much more reasonable. If you talk about regime change, that's the ultimate. No, I said that is serious regime change, right? The third tier that we're dealing with now, I think they're actually much more reasonable and in many ways smarter than the first tier and the second tier, who are no longer with us.
So there's the president talking about the situation in Iran while he is in China. Really, you could say that this Chinese summit was the tale of two straits. The first is the Strait of Hormuz, a very critical waterway, a 30-mile gap where 20% of the world's oil and natural gas passes through on a daily basis when it's open. But it hasn't been open, as you know, because of the conflict in that part of the world. The Chinese really want the Strait of Hormuz open. It's in their national security interest. They don't. They get a lot of oil and gas from that region. One of the things that came out of this is apparently they are going to buy some American oil and gas. That's at least the initial sense of things following this summit. But the other strait that is related to this is the Strait of Taiwan. That little gap of water between China and Taiwan, where a lot of experts have said that if we ever have a World War III, it will likely start in the Strait of Taiwan in a conflict with China. And in fact, there is some of that going on behind the scenes. This from FoxNews.com. Behind summit smiles, President Xi gives blunt warning to Trump of clashes and conflicts. Chinese President Xi Jinping issued a stark warning to President Donald Trump that Taiwan could trigger clashes and even conflicts between the world's two superpowers, injecting a note of potential confrontation into an otherwise upbeat summit in Beijing. President Xi stressed to President Trump that the Taiwan question is the most important issue in China-U.S. relations. If it is handled properly, the bilateral relationship will enjoy overall stability. Otherwise, the two countries will have clashes and even conflicts, putting the entire relationship in great jeopardy. Sea, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Mao Ning said following the meeting. However, the White House downplayed the exchange, with a senior administration official telling Fox News Digital that both sides reiterated their long-stated stance on the issue, and everyone understands each other's position. It's really interesting what we try to do. We try to be vague. We are diplomatically vague about what we will do. At least that's what we've always done. Would we step in if China goes and tries to take over Taiwan, as they have threatened to do time and time? I mean, they have a long memory on these things. They don't deal. Chinese, if you look at them, don't look in the here and now as much as where do we want to be in 10 years? And they definitely want to take Taiwan back. And so, would we then step in to defend them? That is the real pressure point between the United States and China right now. So this whole thing really was about two straits: the Strait of Hormuz, the Straits of Taiwan. But overall, it sounds like there was some stuff there. Here is what CNN has written. Trump leaves China short on deliverables, but with signs of a stabilized relationship. President Trump departed Beijing Friday afternoon local time without any immediate sign that the U.S. and China have resolved thorny challenges dogging their fractious relationship, but with a freshly stabilized relationship with Chinese leader Xi Jinping for now. The leaders covered a range of issues from Taiwan and Taiwan to trade during 2 days that included intensive bilateral meetings, but there were also grand displays of soft diplomacy, marking the first Beijing meeting for the longtime rivals in nearly a decade. Trump was there in 2017. He has reimagined Washington's role in the world, and Xi has tightened his grip on authority domestically and spurred China's high-tech transformation. The question is whether or not their economy is in good shape, and many people say it is not as good a shape as you might imagine, and now the fact that they are losing that Iranian oil for the moment, things are a little tough in China right now. Here we go. This is about the oil. I think this is pretty interesting. U.S. President Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping have agreed to buy American oil, says Trump, in a pre-recorded interview with Fox News that aired Thursday evening stateside as the two nations push for concrete trade and business wins at their ongoing bilateral summit. They've agreed they want to buy oil from the United States. They're going to go to Texas. They're going to start sending Chinese, this is amazing, Chinese ships to Texas and Louisiana and Alaska, Trump said in the interview that was conducted after his meeting with Xi Jinping on Thursday. Now, some people have said that because of that, the price of oil has gone up a bit. China has also agreed to help with Iran negotiations and not to supply military equipment to Iran. Trump said, adding that the Chinese leader would like to see the Strait of Hormuz open and free of tolls. Of course they would. They have an insatiable appetite for energy, and we have unlimited energy, Trump said, saying that the U.S. produces more oil and gas than Saudi Arabia and Russia combined. We're doing twice as much oil and gas as they are. The U.S. produced 223.6 million barrels of oil and other liquid fuel per day in 2025, according to some estimates from the Energy Department. China, by far, I love the way he says China. I can't do it the way he does it. China. By far, China. How do you do it?
China.
China is by far the largest buyer of Iranian oil, purchasing around 90% of Iran's crude exports. So if Iran, I mean, think about that. They take 90% of what Iran normally exports, but they're not exporting anything right now. So you know they've got to be hurting. China said the two leaders had reached a series of new consensus, including an agreement to build constructive strategic stability in bilateral relationships for the next few years and beyond. There was some other stuff that happened around the sort of the periphery of the thing. I mean, when you see the pictures, I mean, it's all remarkable. These summits are all beautiful pictures and warm embraces and flags and troops and it's just a beautiful children with flowers and flags. I mean, they are remarkable to see, and they look like they are really lovely events. But around the edges, and having been to some of these events around the world with presidents, I can tell you there can often be chaos, and that was the case. That was the case with the press corps. They got into it in a big way with the Chinese security. Wherever the president goes, there is a small group of reporters that go with him. It's called the traveling press corps. If he gets on Air Force One, you get on Air Force One and go with him. Small group. If he gets into a motorcade, you get into the motorcade and you go with him. If he goes to play golf, somebody gets in the motorcade and goes out there and sits in the clubhouse until he gets done. If he's whatever it is, there is and I've done a lot of this duty over the years with Bill Clinton and George W. Bush and others. I can tell you there is always a presence, but the Chinese don't understand that. And it got into a shoving match as they were trying to get into a motorcade. The Chinese officials are saying, "No, you can't go. You can't go." They say, "Oh, yes, we can. Oh, yes, we can. Oh, no, you can't. Oh, no, you can't."
Not allowed you. Sir, leave
Okay,
this.
they are literally waiting on us.
We gotta move. We gotta go, guys.
Okay, no, we gotta go.
And so what eventually happened here was the press corps just said, "Screw you, we're going," and they just blew right through Chinese security and got in the motorcade. Peter Ducey had a problem.
We experienced some of that firsthand yesterday. Leaving that welcome ceremony, I was ordered onto a bus that then immediately left with nobody on it except for me and a driver that didn't know I wanted to get off.
Wow.
But after lots of shouting and pointing on the bus and off the bus, we got where we needed to be.
Secret Service had a little back and forth too.
They did. At a separate event, they didn't want to let one of the president's protective detail members bring a firearm in. More shoving, more shouting, but they figured it out.
Yeah, that doesn't work. Peter, as always, thank you.
Well, I'll talk more about, what some of the chaos that can occur around these events. Right now, let's call it 23 minutes past the hour of 5 o'clock on Super Talk 99.7.
Coming up at the bottom of the hour, small plane crashes in the news this morning, and a federal judge makes a decision regarding Tennessee's congressional map redistricting. Again, that's coming up at 5:30 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
It is 27 minutes now past the hour of 5 o'clock on Super Talk 99.7. We were talking here just a moment ago about Peter Doocy having, some conflict with the security people in China and the press corps being hassled, and apparently the Secret Service at one point and the Chinese security got into it because they didn't want a Secret Service agent carrying his weapon into a certain place. I mean, these kind of things do happen behind the scenes, and it looks very polished and very planned, but around the edges often chaos. I recall being with President Clinton. We were on a trip to Africa, and I was on Air Force One duty, and we decided as we were leaving Tanzania, that's right, I've been to Tanzania, and said, we need to swing by Egypt on the way back home to meet with President Mubarak. And so we went to early morning airport meeting in Cairo, and we land there just a little after sunrise. And there is a meeting, and in the press corps, we're supposed to go wherever the president goes, and there was going to be a photo op. And so what traditionally happens in the U.S. world is that, the press corps is brought in, and the cameras come in, and then the reporters fill in around, and they ask questions. And, that's always the way it's done. But in this particular case, the Egyptian security said, you can't go. And I mean, I got pinned against the wall and roughed up pretty good by Egyptian security until Press Secretary Joe Lockhart came to my rescue and got me into the room. Real quick, as you're sitting there, I walk into the room. I'm out of breath. I've been, sort of shoved around and pushed around quite a bit. I'm a little rattled by all of that. And I get into the room, and there's President Mubarak and there's President Clinton. And somebody says, Brian, maybe you should ask a question. Oh, yeah, yes, that's what I'm here for. So I asked a question and got it in. But, I mean, it was just chaos, and that often happens around these things. It's time for the news now. Jay Harper in for Joan Jones, 5:30 on Super Talk 99.7. Brian Wilson in for Dan Mandis.
31 minutes now past 5 a.m. I'm Jay Harper with your top stories, a weather forecast, a traffic report. They're coming up. Federal officials are investigating after a small plane crashed into a home in Akron, Ohio. Trevor Alt with details.
2 people are dead after a small plane slammed into a home in Ohio. The family inside the house escaping from a devastating fire. Authorities say 2 people on board that plane were killed. The tail of the plane wedged in the wreckage of the home.
Officials say the father, he was able to get both of his kids who were asleep and make it out of that home. Another deadly plane crash in New Mexico. Again, here's Trevor Alt.
A medical transport plane crashed in the mountains of New Mexico, leaving 4 people dead and igniting a wildfire. Authorities say the small propeller plane took off from Roswell, carrying 4 crew members and medical personnel around midnight. It lost communications, vanishing from radar, then crashed.
Federal officials are investigating that crash. Back here in Tennessee, a federal judge yesterday denied Tennessee Democrats' request for a temporary restraining order that sought to pause the state's newly approved congressional maps and election changes. Chief U.S. District Judge William L. Campbell Jr. issued the order yesterday, writing that the plaintiff's request for a temporary restraining order was denied, and he canceled a hearing that was scheduled for May 20th. The request was filed by Vicky Hale, Earl Fisher, Talise Turner, Hetty Weinberg, U.S. Representative Steve Cohen, congressional candidate Chaz Mulder, and another congressional candidate, that would be Cheney Mosley, along with state reps Justin Pearson and the entire Tennessee Democratic Party. The group sought emergency intervention after Tennessee lawmakers approved new congressional maps and election timeline changes during a special legislative session earlier this month. The plaintiffs argued the changes, they just come too close to the August primary election and could create confusion for voters, campaigns, as well as election officials. That is the latest news. We've got traffic and weather up next. I'm Jay Harper, WTN News. No accidents or breakdowns to report. However, we do have some stop-and-go traffic north of the city in Sumner County up in the White House area. 65 southbound between exits 104 and 97. The construction up there has got the stop-and-go traffic happening, so be aware of that. We've got your traffic every 10 minutes every morning on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
It is 37 minutes past the hour of 5 o'clock. Good morning, everyone. On this Friday, the 15th day of May, I am Brian Wilson in for Grandpa Mandus, who is off with his daughter, who is having a baby up in Kentucky. So congratulations to Grandpa Mandus. I'll be here all the way till 9 o'clock. Chris Hand will take over then. Jay Harper's in the newsroom for Joan Jones, and Sam, of course, is pushing the blinky buttons, as he always does, so incredibly well. We've got a lot of stuff going on. I mean, the president coming back from China. Yeah, you know, I've been to China on a couple of occasions. I never went there as a reporter. I went there once as a dad and once as a tourist. Many people, I think I've told this story before. I had adopted we adopted a girl from China. Many years ago, and had to go to China for the adoption process. And so I was there in Guangzhou for about 2 weeks, and that was pretty interesting. I've come to understand that the Chinese people are tremendously warm. They really are. They're lovely people. I don't care much for the communists who run the country, but I really love the people of China. And I just have one story that I love to tell. So we're in the middle of this adoption process, and it's 2 weeks. And most days when you are in that middle of that process, you have to go to a doctor's appointment. You got to go in and you got to meet with state officials. You got to go sign documents. You got to do this. They got a thing you got to do every day during this 2 week period, except one day there was nothing on our agenda. And some of the dads that were along on the trip, had decided that they wanted to go out to the country to visit the orphanage where all of our daughters had come from. And this was about 2.5 hours out into the country from Guangzhou in a little fishing village known as Dien Bai. And so we got a driver and a translator and somebody to carry us over there and to look out for us. Fixers is what we call them. And a bunch of us dads went over to have lunch with the person in charge of the orphanage. And that all went pretty well. I had my paperwork with me. And I knew that my daughter had been abandoned at a police station in Guangzhou. And I wanted to go there to see it. And so we found out where it was, and we drove over there. And I also knew that the person who had found my daughter on that day was sort of what you would call, in this country, he would be a county judge. Han De Tong was his name. And I wanted to meet him if I could and have him tell me the story of what happened the day he found my daughter. And so I sent our translator, our handler around, and she found him, and he came out, and I have videotape of him explaining exactly what happened on that day. I found her here. She was in a small box. She was very upset. She was very angry. We got her some food, and we took her to the orphanage, and he tells the whole story. Well, I was thrilled to have that background on all of that. Well, then come to find out, all the other dads said, we've really need you to show us where you found my daughter. And they were in different places all around this little town of Dien Bai. And so this county judge got into our van with us and drove around to each of the locations and got out and talked to the dads. Yes, your daughter was here, and this is what happened here, and this is what happened here. And we found, and I mean, it was a remarkable experience to have all that information, you know, and the guy treated us like gold. We finally took took him back to his office, and we thanked him profusely, and we're headed back to Guangzhou. And I noticed that my driver and our handler were having a very animated, conversation in Chinese, and I wanted to know more about what they were talking about. So I asked our handler, "What's going on? What are y'all talking about? It seems like you're a very animated conversation." And she said, "Well, the driver was just telling me how that when we were driving around, Pandey Tong was giving him directions on where to go and where to turn and that kind of stuff. And at one point, he said he looked over and Mr. Pandey Tong was wiping tears away from his eyes." And I said, "Tears? Why?" I said, he was very happy that these girls had found good families. Well, I mean, that just broke my heart. It was such a poignant story. And it was then I sort of come to realize that, this guy was a county judge, which meant he was a communist official of some kind. You don't get to be a county judge unless you play the party politics there in China. So he was a communist. He was also a good man. So, I came to understand, and my worldview sort of changed that day, that yes, we can dislike what the Chinese are as communists, but you have to understand that even within a communist system, there are good people. And this was a lovely guy. He passed away. By the time I got back there the second time on a tourism trip, Mr. Pandey Tong had passed away. And I went by to try to say hello to him, but he was gone. But it was a wonderful and warm visit both times to China. The people, I got to tell you, tremendously warm. And I really wish we could have better relationships. It's just that, they're a bunch of communists. That's what there is that. By the way, they didn't know I was a reporter when I went. And I had to sort of keep that secret. And, they told us, don't ever say that you're a reporter. Come up with some term of art for it. So the term of art that I came up with was that I was an analyst. What does an analyst do? An analyst writes reports for the bosses. And they accepted that answer. I think they pretty much knew, though. We were pretty sure we were being monitored. At one point, we were going to take all the babies out to a park not far from our hotel. And so everybody got loaded up to go, and we got outside, and it was pretty cool. And we decided about a block into it, let's go back to the hotel. It's just too cool to be out here today. We don't need the babies out in this cool air. So we returned unexpectedly to our hotel rooms. When I got to the hotel room, there were 3 guys in the hotel room in coveralls working on the, and I'm using air quotes here, smoke detector. They were very interested in the smoke. Interestingly, when I got back to the hotel room, I couldn't get into the room safe anymore. I was locked out of the room safe. Had to have people come up and reset it so we could get into the room safe. So from that point on, we sort of figured that we were being watched very closely, and we were very careful about the things we said. And I never did mention to anybody that I was a reporter, but I'm pretty sure they figured that one out. Interesting. Hey, one other thing that was going on yesterday, aside from all of the activity in Iran and all the activity in China, we sent our CIA director to Cuba on a government plane, big government plane. And, everybody says, well, after Iran is resolved, they're going to try to do something on Cuba, perhaps. Here's what I know. Associated Press. CIA Director John Ratcliffe met with Cuban officials, including Raul Castro's grandson, during a high-level visit to the island Thursday. Cuban and U.S. officials confirmed. Now, Ratcliffe met with Raul Guillermo Rodriguez Castro, Interior Minister Lazaro Alvarez Casas, and the head of Cuban intelligence services to discuss intelligence cooperation, economic stability, and security issues. This is all confirmed by a CIA official talking to the Associated Press. Ratcliffe was there to, quote, personally deliver Donald Trump's message that the United States is prepared to seriously engage on economic and security issues, but only if Cuba is ready to make fundamental changes. An official statement from Cuba's government noted that Thursday's meeting took place against a backdrop of complex bilateral relations. While the U.S. stressed that Cuba cannot continue to be a safe haven for adversaries in the Western Hemisphere, the Cuban delegation insisted that the island presents no threat to U.S. security. Cuban officials also took issue with the nation's continued inclusion on the U.S. list of state sponsors of terrorism. Well, they were. Rodriguez Castro previously secretly met with the U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio at the Caribbean Community Summit at St. Kitts in February. While he has never occupied a government post, the younger Castro served as his grandfather's bodyguard and later as head of Cuba's equivalent of the Secret Service. U.S. and Cuban officials met earlier the year in Cuba. The ongoing meetings between U.S. and Cuba marked the first government flights to land in Cuba other than at the U.S. Naval Base at Guantanamo Bay since 2016. From CNBC, CIA chief makes historic trip to Cuba as U.S. blockade chokes island's energy supplies. There's no gas, no fuel in Cuba, in the entire island. They're running out of gasoline and energy. The U.S. has reiterated its offer of assistance to Cuba in exchange for fundamental changes. You see, they've been the Russians can't support them anymore. They lost, what they had going with other countries in the region, and so they really are in a bind. They got nobody to support them. So if we ever want to go in and swoop up and try to make things right with Cuba, this seems like the proper time because they need us really badly. CIA director delivered a message to top Cuban lawmakers, according to news agency Reuters, stating that Washington would seriously engage with the country's government, but only if it makes fundamental changes. On Thursday, the CIA posted photos on social media of Ratcliffe in the Cuban capital, Havana, with no context. That's pretty fascinating. Cuba says, UPI, Cuban Energy Minister Vicente de la Oleve, I think that's right, said that the country's diesel and fuel stocks had run completely dry and that the energy system was on life support due to the oil embargo imposed by the United States in January. We have absolutely no diesel, O'Leary said in an interview broadcast on state-run national television Wednesday night, in which he repeatedly stated that oil stocks to generate power for the electrical grid were pretty exhausted too. So you don't have diesel, you're running out of gas, and you don't have enough oil to run your generator plant, so you're going to run out of electricity. O'Leary said that a lone delivery of 730,000 barrels of oil that had been sent there by Russia in March had run out, and the national grid was now completely dependent on Cuba's home-produced crude oil, natural gas, and renewable energy, which ain't much. In Havana, blackouts now exceed 20 to 22 hours per day. Can you imagine? It's becoming hotter. It's getting warm down there. So there you have it. I mean, boy, it's fascinating that we might well be able to do something with Cuba because they need us and they don't have anybody who can support them anymore. The island nation is in trouble. Will we have a better relationship with Cuba? Can we undo all the damage that has been done since the Cuban Missile Crisis of the 60s? It'll be interesting to see what happens in the days ahead. It is 51 minutes past the hour of 5 o'clock on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Coming up at the top of the hour, we'll have these stories. A change in U.S. troop presence in Europe that has surprised many. And a warning to teens about a popular high school prank. And we'll also have this morning's money news. That's coming up at 6 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
It is 55 minutes now past the hour of 5 o'clock. It's Brian Wilson filling in for Grandpa Dan Mandis today as he travels up to witness the birth of his new grandchild. And so I'm filling in today. Chris Han will be in here at 9 o'clock. So, you know, we're hoping the very best. Joan Jones also off today. So Jay Harper's in the newsroom and Sam's pushing the blinky buttons. There's nothing I hate more in the world, perhaps, than ticks. I mean, if you ever get the tick willies where, you find one tick and then you think you're crawling with them.
Yeah.
I hate that. But ticks, I just hate them. If you got puppies, you got to watch out for ticks. And I have 2 puppies now, so doing a lot to it. Here's a story that will not sit well with many people. Tennessee, this is from News Channel 5. Tennessee could see more ticks in this year, a mild winter, and increased Nashville construction may be driving a rise in tick sightings and ER visits from tick bites across the state. Got to watch out for ticks. Tennessee health officials are warning residents about higher than usual tick activity this year, with a milder winter and ongoing Nashville construction potentially contributing to the surge. Dennis Hoy, owner of Evergreen Pests, said his company is already seeing a significant increase in demand. We're averaging 10 to 15 tick treatments a week right now. That's on the high side. Tennessee Department of Health has issued warnings about the uptick in ticks. You see what they did there? There's an uptick in ticks. According to the CDC, emergency room visits due to tick bites are up compared to the same time last year. Warmer weather in the winter is the key factor. But they say that because they are tearing up so much of our wooded areas for growth and development inside Nashville, that you probably are, making the ticks go elsewhere. They're looking for a place to be. Nobody wants to be dealing with ticks.
Where's the worst place you've had one?
Oh, I don't know that I can tell you that one. I know. I mean, you're sitting on the couch, and you're petting your puppy, and all of a sudden ooh, what's that? Get the tweezers out.
Oh,
I don't know.
boy.
There's a whole philosophy about how you go about this, but I'm telling you, I hate them. And apparently, what I'm told is that this summer could be maybe one of the worst ones for ticks, mainly because we didn't really have a very cold winter, and mainly because there's construction and the ticks are being forced out of areas where they normally live. So get ready. Look out for your little pet friends. Make sure they don't have ticks and they have the proper kind of treatments to avoid that. And then check your kids when they come in from playing outside. I find them when I'm working out in the yard. Like if I'm working out in the yard, and I've been out there, clearing brush or something, that's when I'll find them. But I'm telling you. What about you? Where's the worst one you ever found?
Let me take an educated guess as to where I was actually on a hike, and I was about 12 years old, and I felt a burning sensation in my middle region, and I was out in public in broad daylight, and well, here I see something burrowing into a region it should not, all while there's a group of girls trying to cross this bridge on this trail behind me. So I was performing rapid surgery in the woods.
Yeah, yikes! I know. Yeah, and well, get ready, folks. The ticks are among us. Now, coming up today, as we go forward with the rest of Nashville's morning news, we're going to go to talk about what's happening in the swamp. J.D. Vance had a big event yesterday where he's ferreting out fraud. There was an unbelievable COVID hearing yesterday. We'll talk about 2028 and the ongoing rivalry between Marco Rubio and J.D. Vance. I mean, it seems like a lot of people are wondering who's going to be the nominee in 28. Both of them doing quite well. And we'll revisit what happened in China and what happened in Cuba and all those kinds of things coming up and redistricting. We'll do about redistricting in Tennessee and the high cost of living. It's all straight ahead right here on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
It is 1 minute past 6 a.m. I'm Jay Harper with your top stories, your weekend forecast, and a traffic report. They are coming up. The Pentagon has abruptly changed plans and decided not to send a brigade of about 4,200 troops from Fort Hood, Texas to Poland. The Army's 1st Cavalry Division and 2nd Armored Brigade Combat Team, they were scheduled to rotate in and replace an outgoing armored unit. The decision this week to cancel the move came as a major surprise to the troops and commanders in the unit since they've been preparing to move out for weeks. But ABC's security reporter, Steve Baimanen, he tells ABC News podcast Start Here that the president has talked about drawing down American presence in Europe.
The president announced he was withdrawing 5,000 troops from Germany, and he said through both of his tenures, he's been very skeptical of using American power in Europe, often saying those countries need to take much more of the responsibility for their own security.
Back here in the U.S., warnings about a prank that's popular among high schoolers that took a dangerous turn in Michigan. ABC's Hannah Battah has that story.
This morning, authorities are warning teenagers after a popular game nearly turned deadly. An officer near Flint, Michigan, approaches what he thinks is a burglary in progress, only to be suddenly sprayed by a squirt gun.
Hey, what, dude? Sorry. Get on the ground.
In an instant, the officer holds his fire. The teen was participating in what's known as Water Wars, or Senior Assassin, a game that's become popular on social media.
Police have been called to that area and were investigating reports of possible car thieves. We now have this morning's money news. For that, here's Jim Ryan.
The Standard & Poor's and the NASDAQ Composite set new records Thursday, each rising more than 0.75%. The Dow Jones came very close to an all-time high of its own, adding 370 points to finish the session just over 50,000. Iran says 30 ships, including oil tankers, passed through the Strait of Hormuz yesterday, but it wasn't enough to affect worldwide crude prices. Brent crude was sitting right around $107 a barrel overnight. Electric vehicles have zapped the bottom line at Honda. The carmaker reported its first annual loss ever, $2.7 billion. Honda points to the upheaval of the EV market in the United States and on-again, off-again U.S. tariffs. Texas dominated the Census Bureau's latest population rankings with all 5 of the nation's fastest-growing cities. The Dallas suburb of Salina topped the list, growing by 24.6% from mid-2024 to mid-2025.
That is the latest news. We've got weather, we've got traffic, and they're both on the way. I'm Jay Harper, WTN News. Still looking pretty good traffic-wise. No accidents or breakdowns currently reported. We do have the beginning of the normal congestion buildup. That would be the 6524 junction there near Trinity Lane. And the same can be said up in the Millersville area. There is some construction out there, as you well know, folks that travel that every day. And the slowdowns are happening as a result of the construction there. But aside from that, we're looking pretty good. Traffic every 10 minutes every morning on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Seven minutes now past the hour of 6 o'clock on Super Talk 99.7. It is hour number 2 of Nashville's Morning News with Dan Mandis. I'm Brian Wilson filling in for Grandpa Dan as he goes off to spend time with his daughter and his new grandchild. So we're happy to be in under those circumstances for sure. We got Joan Jones off today, so Jay Harper's in the newsroom and Sam's pushing the blinky buttons. All kinds of stuff going on. The president is on his way back from China. I keep seeing the pictures of all of the pomp and the ceremony and the circumstance. And I'm reminded that in China, there is apparently President Xi doesn't like it when he's compared to Winnie the Pooh. Did you know this? I mean, apparently in China, a lot of people think that the president of China looks like Pooh Bear.
Yeah, he doesn't like it.
He doesn't like it. He's got the Pooh Bear nose. There's no doubt about it. No doubt about it. Let's start by going, while you're in China, you got your Secretary of State there. Secretary of State needs to be there. International trip, yeah. But what do you do if you're the vice president? I mean, when the president leaves the country, you got to be there. You got to stay back in Washington in case you were needed. And so J.D. Vance can't really get on the plane and go to China. And so he's doing his whole run right now is about taking on his new role as fighter of fraud. And believe me, there is a lot of fraud to be looked at here. Take a look here's J.D. Vance talking about Medicare fraud at an event yesterday and how they are cutting back on the Medicare money that's going to California because they believe that a good portion of that money is being lost to fraud, waste, and abuse.
So I want to be clear here. We're talking about withholding the Medicaid fraud enforcement payments that go to the state bureaucrats. We're not talking about withholding people's benefits. We're talking about turning off the resources that the state government should be using to police fraud. And then instead, we're going to use those resources ourselves because we're actually taking the fraud issue very seriously. But I do think it raises a very important issue. There are going to be some politicians who say, what you're doing here is harming the Medicaid program. We're trying to save the Medicaid program from dysfunctional state bureaucrats. If you allow hundreds of millions, billions, even more money to go out the door, not to healthcare services for low-income families, but to fraudsters, you eventually are going to destroy the Medicaid program. So this is why we say, red state, blue state, this does not need to be a political or a partisan issue. We want to work with you to eliminate fraud and make these programs last longer for the people who truly need them.
I mean, really, there is a rivalry within the Trump administration, it would seem, although they say they're best friends and they like each other and they're not thinking about it. You know that there's got to be some speculation going on right now in the back rooms at the White House about who is going to be the nominee in 2028. Is it going to be J.D. Vance, who has taken on in his portfolio, fraud, waste, and abuse. And, that's something that resonates with the American people. If he can become, the person who battles fraud, that's a pretty good job. But, I mean, the other side of that equation is you got Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, National Security Advisor, and a man who is apparently in the very good graces of President Trump right now. And he's also been very impressive. So who is going to be the nominee? That's a great question. President Donald Trump. Here we go. Doesn't sound like... Let's see. I'm trying to, as Trump fuels Vance versus Rubio speculation, his vice president makes anti-fraud push. Unlike Trump, neither man is talking about their future political ambitions, instead letting their public profiles and actions speaks for themselves. And Vance, who compared himself to the kid in Home Alone with both Trump and Rubio in China this week, had the White House campus to himself on Wednesday for an event on fraud. He announced several new efforts to combat fraud in federal health care programs, including one targeting, as you heard, in California, whose Democrat governor is a 2028 hopeful in his own right. I just don't think it sounds like the president of the United States to have a televised competition for who would succeed him as his apprentice. Vance deadpanned when pressed by CNN on why Trump seems to enjoy pitting him against Rubio and against each other. The president on Monday asked attendees at a Rose Garden dinner to cheer for their preference. Who's it going to be? He loves that. He wants to be the kingmaker. It's going to be interesting to see who actually, becomes at the top of the ticket. I mean, if you look at some polls, you get that J.D. Vance has the advantage right now, because I think his name is better known by more people since he's the vice president of the United States. But there's other polls out there that suggest that Marco Rubio would be a very popular choice. And I personally like both men. If I had my preference, the nominee would be Marco Rubio, because I just think he's a once-in-a-generation political talent. I really do. I think he's really amazing. J.D. Vance, I love him. I think he's great. He's doing a great job as vice president. I have no problems at all if something happens to Trump that J.D. Vance would step up to the plate and handle it. I think he is entirely capable of handling that job. But I think that Marco Rubio might actually excel at it. But that's my personal opinion. You're entitled to yours as well, but it's interesting that this is going on behind the scenes. As long as we're talking about 2028, here's one. Who are the Democrats going to put up in 28? You got any ideas about that? I do. A recent Atlas Intel poll found far-left representative, are you ready? Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez leading the potential crowd of 2028 presidential candidates. Unlike some recent surveys that showed failed presidential candidate Kamala Harris as the fan favorite, this survey had the squad member leading the pack with 26% support among Democrats. Former Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg came in second place with 22.4%, followed by 21.2% who chose California Governor Gavin Newsom. Harris, in that poll, came in fourth with 12.9% support, all other potential candidates falling into single digits. Ocasio-Cortez has not said if she plans to run for president, and many are urging her to run for Chuck Schumer's seat in the Senate. However, she recently told David Axelrod that her ambition is to change the country, explaining that she does not want to base her current actions on future aspirations politically, as all of those are temporary roles. They assume that my ambition is a title or a seat. My ambition is way bigger than that. My ambition, she says, is to change the country. God help us all. God help us all. But she does lead. Isn't that interesting? In this one poll, she leads, and you got Buttigieg number 2, Gavin Newsom number 3, and Kamala Harris number 4. That is really, really, Really interesting. Let's take a break now and see what's going on with traffic and weather at 15 minutes past the hour of 6 o'clock on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. All right, in our forecast today, looks like it's going to be a beautiful day when it finally gets here. 81 degrees today, 85 on Saturday, 88 on Sunday. Really nice weekend on tap. Right now, you might want to put on a long sleeve shirt or carry a light jacket or a sweater or something because it's a bit nippy outside. It's in the upper 40s, but again, heading up to 81. Later today. 16 minutes past the hour of 6 o'clock on Super Talk 99.7. Brian Wilson in for Dan Mandis. We're talking about the 2028 candidates and who's likely to proceed. Is it going to be on our side? Is it going to be Rubio? Is it going to be Vance? On the other side, is it possible that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez could become the Democrat nominee for president? I'd take all of that I could get. In fact, there's not anybody on the other side of the equation that particularly concerns me. I think we have a very deep bench, and I think their bench is really, really shallow. In the swamp, there's a guy that I always admire. I don't always agree with him. For example, I don't agree with his position on the Iran war, but I like him. And what I love about Rand Paul, Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky, is that, he is like a dog with a bone when he gets on something. And, I often find, even though I don't always agree with him, I always find him to be thoughtful. But I think he's right when he talks about COVID and the things that happened back then, and the role of Anthony Fauci of steering the COVID probe. Big hearing yesterday. Here's Rand Paul.
The COVID-19 pandemic was one of the most consequential events of our lifetime. And to this day, the American people have never received a full accounting of where it came from, what our government knew, and why they had to fight their own government to find out. Today, the committee will hear from an intelligence community whistleblower about these questions. The witness will testify that the CIA scientific analysts repeatedly concluded that a laboratory leak was the most likely origin of COVID-19, and that those conclusions were buried, softened, or withheld from Congress while the public was told to trust a different story. For years, Americans were told to trust the experts, trust the agencies, trust the intelligence community, and trust the officials who assured us that they were following the science. But the evidence before the committee tells a very different story. Today, we will expose a system in which a small circle of officials, scientists, grantees, and intelligence advisors move from agencies to agency, meeting to meeting, briefing to briefing, reviewing one another's work, and shaping one another's conclusions and presenting those conclusions to Congress and the public as if they were independent conclusions. Only it was not independent, it was a circle. One part of that circle is a body most Americans have never heard of, the Biological Sciences Expert Group, known as BSEG, or the B Group. BSEG operates under the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. Its stated purpose is to give the intelligence community access to outside scientific experts. The COVID-19 pandemic was...
There you go. You have it. There is Rand Paul opening up the hearing. Now, let's hear from that whistleblower. His name is James Erdman. And he says basically Anthony Fauci had his thumb on the scale and was trying to push all of the intelligence analysis of where COVID came from away from the lab theory and into other theories. And he was working behind the scenes, pushing this agenda. And here's what James Erdman had to say.
Intelligence community leaders and senior analysts downplayed the possibility that the COVID pandemic originated as a result of a lab incident. Motives are difficult to define given the scope of the Diggs review. Intentional or not, the IC's actions resulted in a cover-up, wasted resources, and a failure to properly inform policymakers. Public health policy would have been very different had the American public been made aware that a virus from a lab in China was going to serve as the foundation for an emergency use authorization mRNA products being mandated by the former administration. Dr. Fauci's role in the cover-up was intentional. Dr. Fauci influenced the analytical process and findings by leveraging his position to ensure the IC consulted with a conflicted list of curated subject matter experts, public health officials, and scientists. This included some of the authors of the paper, The Proximal Origin of SARS-CoV-2, and other public health experts who have been in his orbit for the last 20-plus years.
There you go. I mean, he laid it right at the foot of Anthony Fauci. He had his finger on the scale. He was trying to push people toward a conclusion that I think obfuscated the fact that virus leaked out of a lab in Wuhan, the Wuhan lab in China, and was funded by U.S. dollars that Anthony Fauci sent that direction. He was trying to protect his reputation. He was trying to obfuscate that fact. And so he did everything he could to push us away from this idea that the virus, the COVID-19 virus, was basically a change of function research project that went awry and leaked out of the lab there in China and killed millions of people. It is a scandal if this is true, and here you have a whistleblower saying it is true that Fauci was behind all of that. It is an amazing story. Millions of people died. We went through an incredibly difficult economic time in this country during the COVID-19 outbreak. We were led down the wrong path as to what was the correct science to deal with the matter. And it was all basically to protect Fauci's reputation. If this pans out, it is one of the greatest scandals of all time, and millions of people died because of what Anthony Fauci was doing with that lab in Wuhan, China. Wuhan lab in China. From redstate.com. A decorated CIA officer testified before the Senate on Wednesday that Dr. Anthony Fauci deliberately manipulated intelligence community analysis on COVID-19 origins, steering federal investigators away from the lab leak theory and toward a predetermined conclusion of natural origin. Yeah, this didn't happen naturally. The fix was in from the beginning. Fauci handpicked the experts. He shaped the process, leveraged a network of grant-dependent researchers to make sure the intelligence community reached the answer that he wanted. The hearing confirmed what millions of Americans long suspected. The government lied, and it knew it was lying. 24 minutes now, past the hour of 6 o'clock on Super Talk 99.7.
Coming up at the bottom of the hour, the president on his way back to the U.S. from China. We'll let you know what is expected when he returns. Also, Texas continues with an execution, and a federal judge, he makes a decision regarding Tennessee's congressional map redistricting. We'll have that for you at 6:30 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. 32 minutes past 6 a.m. I'm Jay Harper with your top stories, the forecast, and traffic in a few minutes. The president has now wrapped up his trip to China for his summit with President Xi Jinping. During the trip, President Trump says they discussed Iran and both agreed that Iran can never have a nuclear weapon. Trump also says China agreed to put in an order for 200 planes from Boeing. More now from ABC's Lionel Moyes.
The president says China will also be buying American oil and soybeans, which China stopped buying last year during a trade dispute. Tech CEOs joining Trump on the trip with artificial intelligence a major focus. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says China agreed to work together on AI safety.
The execution, it was a stay of execution. It was issued by an appeals court Wednesday, but it got lifted yesterday, and a man in Texas was put to death last night. ABC's Jim Ryan says Edward Busby Jr. was pronounced dead minutes after receiving a lethal injection.
With 600 executions to its name, no other state even comes close to the number of lethal injections administered at the Texas death house in Huntsville. Edward Busby was condemned for the suffocation death of Laura Lee Crane, a retired professor from Texas Christian University. Prosecutors said she was abducted from a grocery store parking lot in January 2004 and left to suffocate in the trunk of her car. Jim Ryan, ABC News.
A federal judge on Thursday denied Tennessee Democrats' request for a temporary restraining order that sought to pause the state's newly approved congressional maps and election changes. Chief U.S. District Judge William L. Campbell Jr. issued the order Thursday, writing that the plaintiff's request for a temporary restraining order was denied and canceling a hearing previously scheduled for May 20th. The request was filed by a number of Democrats, including the Democratic Party here in Tennessee. The group sought emergency intervention after Tennessee lawmakers approved new congressional maps and election timeline changes. It all happened during a special legislative session earlier this month. Plaintiffs argued the changes came too close to the August primary election and could create confusion for voters, campaigns, and election officials. That is the latest news. Weather and traffic are next. I'm Jay Harper, WTN News. Well, we always have delays here anyway. Now they're going to get worse. This would be 65 southbound near Trinity Lane. We've got a crash, and it's blocking the right lane. So get ready for that. Also seeing construction delays up north of the city, 65 southbound in that Millersville area. We've got your traffic every 10 minutes every morning on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
"38 minutes past the hour of 6 o'clock. Good morning, everybody. It's Friday, May 15th. Brian Wilson in for Dan Mandis. Grandpa Dan headed to Kentucky to see his new grandchild, and that is exciting. So we're excited for Dan. Joan is off today. Jay Harper in the newsroom. The only person in his rightful place this morning is Sam, who's doing a fantastic job pushing the blinky buttons. Good morning, Sam.
Why, thank you, sir.
All right. So there's a lot going on. The president's winging his way back from China. My memory is that's about a 16-hour flight. I mean, the longest flight I ever took on Air Force One was coming from, well, we were coming from South Korea, but Asia. And we were coming back, and it was like, are we ever going to get there? It takes forever. But he's on his way back now, and a successful meeting with Xi. We'll talk about that coming up in the next hour, without any doubt. We'll revisit everything that happened there. There's some good things that are coming out of that. But I want to start this half hour by talking about what's going on with redistricting in the state of Tennessee. As you know, we have held a special session where we redistricted, came up with a map to redistrict and basically redo the map so that it's very favorable to Republican candidates in all 9 congressional districts. And the Democrats are losing their ever-loving minds, as you might imagine. But following a Supreme Court, I'm talking the U.S. Supreme Court decision, they believe they are well poised to carry this off. It's looking good so far. From the Tennessee Star, judge blocks Tennessee Democrats' attempt to stop new congressional map before the 26 midterm elections, which, as you know, are not that far off. Chief U.S. District Court Judge William L. Campbell, Jr. issued an order on Thursday blocking Tennessee Democrats' emergency efforts to halt the implementation of the state's newly enacted congressional map and election law changes ahead of the 2026 election cycle. Last week, U.S. Representative Steve Cohen, State Representative Justin Pearson, the Tennessee Democrat Party, and several other voters filed a lawsuit in federal court seeking to block the state's new congressional map and election law changes from taking effect. In the 23-page initial complaint, plaintiffs argue the state changed the rules in the middle of the game by moving the candidate qualifying deadline from March to May 15th and creating a new special qualifying period for candidates after campaigns had already been operating for months under the previous congressional map. So this is going to go to the courts, but at least initially, the judge has denied the Democrats' request for a temporary restraining order to keep this from going into effect. Axios. U.S. Chief District Judge Chip Campbell on Thursday rejected Tennessee Democrats' request for a temporary restraining order to stop the state from implementing a new House map that favors Republicans. Why it matters, the legal challenges to the new map will press on, but Campbell's ruling is a critical setback for opponents. Democrat candidates, including Steve Cohen, I went through all of that, right? Tennessee Republicans drew new district boundaries during a special session last week in hopes of giving the GOP control of all 9 of the state's U.S. House seats. By the way, if everybody goes forward with redoing these districts as it now appears they will, it can potentially change the outcome in the midterm election. That's why this is so important. If past is prologue, if history is our guide, then the party in power traditionally does not do well during midterm elections. It's not at all uncommon during, some midterm elections to lose 20 or 30 seats if you're the party in power. You might remember Barack Obama lost 60 seats in the House, which caused him to come to the microphones and say it wasn't just a beating, it was a shellacking. So it can happen to the party in power. Right now, of course, we control the White House, both houses of Congress, and we have a 6-3 majority in the conservative Supreme Court, allegedly. And so, yeah, there's no way you can make the argument that we're not in charge. And it is entirely possible. Some would say, history is replete with examples of how the party in power does not do well in the midterm elections. But if we can eliminate a bunch of Democrat seats and turn them into Republican seats through redistricting, then that's going to help us out a lot. And by some estimates, the Cook Political Report says Republicans are poised to do okay in the midterm election if this all plays out the way we think it's going to play out. What an outcome that would be. Here's another story. WKRN.com puts it this way. A federal judge has denied an emergency request to temporarily block Tennessee's newly redrawn congressional maps from taking effect. The ruling cancels a hearing that had been scheduled for May 20th and allows the state's new district lines to remain in place as the broader legal fight continues through federal court. What the judge did not do was explain why. As of Thursday evening, no written memorandum has been released outlining the reasoning behind the decision to deny the temporary restraining order sought by plaintiffs challenging the maps. Traditionally, when you do that, it's because you don't feel like they have, on its face, a very strong case, the Democrats. So it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out in the days ahead, but at least for now, good news for Republicans. A judge has said that the Democrats' request for an emergency order that would stop this from happening has been denied. Good news for Republicans, bad news for Democrats. Coming up in just a moment, how much does it cost to live comfortably in the state of Tennessee as compared to other states? We're doing all right, and I'll explain that in just a moment. 45 minutes now past the hour of 6 o'clock on Super Talk. And the forecast calls for a high today of 81. Weekend looking really good. Temperatures in the mid to upper 80s. A little cool this morning as we head into the day. It'll get nice, but right now a bit chilly outside. Temperatures in the upper 40s. 645 Super Talk 99.7. Brian Wilson in for Dan Mandis. And we want to talk a little bit about, why it's such a good place to be, the state of Tennessee. Well, I'll tell you something. You think it's rough right now filling up your gas tank? Let me tell you what rough is, my friends. I mean, it's bad. Don't get me wrong. I'm not denying that your gas is expensive and it's costing you more. I think it's a temporary thing, but one way or the other, I get it. It hurts. But compare and contrast the average price for a gallon of gas in Tennessee to a gallon of gas in California. In Tennessee, the Tennessee state average is $4.12 a gallon. You know what it is in California? $6.14 a gallon. And what's the difference there? The difference is how much they charge and tack on in taxes to a gallon of gas in California. The national average, by the way, is about $4.52 a gallon. So gasoline is expensive, but the reason it's more expensive in California is taxes. The reason that it's more expensive to live in California, by and large, it's taxes. We have very low taxes here in the state of Tennessee. We have no state income tax whatsoever, and that has made us a very attractive place to go if you want to retire. From Fox Business, a breakdown state by state of how much money you need to retire, and Tennessee does pretty well. A study by MoneyLion analyzed the monthly savings needed to retire comfortably across states after accounting for the national average expenses for retired households, as well as whether the retirees would have Social Security income when the retiree began saving for retirement. The report found that the state with the highest annual cost of living for retirees was Hawaii. Annual cost, $90,000. For necessities, to live comfortably, $181,000 would be needed. After accounting for Social Security income, MoneyLion estimates the annual cost of living as a retiree beyond your Social Security, $156,000. To save enough money to afford that cost of living, a retirement person would need to have saved $5,800 a month over 45 years at the age of 20. Wow. California, second highest. MoneyLion estimated that just to get by with the basic necessities in California, you need $73,387. Or if you want to live more comfortably, $121. The monthly savings would be $4,514 starting at the age of 20. That's how much you have to put away. How can you even afford to retire there? When starting at age 20, if you start at age 30, it's $5,800 a month. That's expensive. So compare and contrast that with some other states where they don't have a state income tax. Florida, $44,170 for necessities, $88,000 for a comfortable cost of living. But let's get into it. Alabama, $32,000 for a necessities income. Tennessee and Texas virtually tied. Tennessee, $38,000 is what you need to live comfortably. To get by, and you need more than that to live comfortably. Texas is about the same. One of the cheapest is West Virginia, where you only need $29,000 to live comfortably. That's pretty good. That's pretty amazing. Maryland, where I lived, Maryland, you need $50,000 beyond your Social Security just to get the basics. I mean, I talk about how when I left Maryland and came to Tennessee, how I got a big pay raise. That's because I didn't have to pay state income tax in Tennessee, and I did in Maryland. It was expensive. Cost of living pretty good here in Tennessee. That's why so many people are coming here to find a place to retire. I'm telling you. Aren't you glad you live in a state, no state income tax, conservative leadership that keeps costs at bay a tremendous amount when compared to other states? It is 51 minutes now past the hour of 6 o'clock on Super Talk 99.7.
Coming up at the top of the hour, we'll have the latest on the president and his trip to China as he heads back to the U.S. We'll also hear the latest on the hantavirus. We've all been hearing about that. And a major railroad in the nation threatening to go on strike. We'll have those stories at 7 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
It is 57 minutes now past the hour of 6 o'clock on Super Talk 99.7. Brian Wilson in the chair for Dan Mandis, who is out becoming a granddad again. How about that? Grandpa Dan. Hey, here's some really good news. We apparently are doing much better when it comes to losing people to fentanyl in a big way. Preliminary government data show that approximately 70,000 Americans died from drug overdoses in 2025. That sounds bad, but it's actually a 14% decline compared to the previous year. The third consecutive annual drop, bringing the total back to pre-pandemic levels seen in 2019. That, in 2022, we had 110,000 people in this country. That's a small city. That's a medium-sized city who died as a result of fentanyl overdoses. Wow. Health officials said deaths involving fentanyl and other synthetic opioids saw some of the steepest drops, but fatalities tied to cocaine and methamphetamines also declined. Experts credited expanded access to naloxone, increased addiction treatment, opioid settlement funding, and shifts in illegal drug supplies for the improvement. Fall comes amid a crackdown on cartels and cross-border and seaborne drug traffic by the Trump administration, including military strikes on drug smuggling vessels. It is perhaps a real fundamental change in the arc of the overdose crisis, writes one researcher. So, good news, the war on drugs is winning, and fewer people are dying as a result of fentanyl. Hopefully, if we can have a good agreement with the Chinese to stop sending us the drugs, the chemicals that make up fentanyl, then we could perhaps even drive that down a little better. It is time for the news at 7 o'clock on Super Talk 99.7. The president winging his way back from China. We'll talk about that and much more coming up in the next hour of Nashville's Morning News with Dan Mandis. Brian Wilson in for Dan Mandis.
It is 7 a.m. I'm Jay Harper with your top stories, traffic and weather. They're coming up. President Trump has indeed wrapped up his trip to China and his summit with the Chinese president, and he's now on his way back to the U.S. ABC's Mary Bruce says the president spoke with Xi Jinping about Iran, and Trump says both agree that Iran should never have a nuclear weapon.
Trump, who brought along with him over a dozen top American business leaders, also touting what he claims are, quote, fantastic trade deals, saying China will be buying American soybeans and 200 Boeing planes. But the Chinese have not confirmed these commitments.
More people are now being monitored for hantavirus after an outbreak initially centered on a cruise ship. ABC's Victor Oquindo has more.
At least 41 Americans in a dozen states being monitored for hantavirus, including 16 people who the CDC says were not on the cruise where the outbreak began, but may have been exposed during travel on flights. In Kansas, 3 of those transferred to the hospital for observation after officials say they had high-risk exposure to an infected person who was not on the ship while abroad.
Employees from the Long Island Railroad, one of the major train lines in the nation's biggest city, could be going on strike this weekend as negotiations are going nowhere. ABC's Anthony Carlo, he's in New York.
We can gauge optimism all we want, but the fact is negotiations are at a stalemate. Neither side could say anything promising about where talks stand. It appears as though both sides are hung up on what wages for LIRR workers could look like in the 4th year of a new contract.
3,500 union workers, including engineers, signalmen, and trainmen, will likely walk off the job tomorrow morning if a deal with the Metropolitan Transit Authority is not reached. Let's take a look at your stock numbers here this morning. This before the opening bell. The Dow futures down 308, the S&P down 69.5, and the NASDAQ down 384. That's the latest news. Traffic and weather are next. I'm Jay Harper, WTN News. Our traffic situation continues to look pretty good here on a Friday morning. We are still trying to clear that crash 65 southbound at Trinity Lane. And we are still seeing some slowdowns up in the Millersville area. The construction delays on 65 southbound are still there. And we are, of course, seeing the normal delays on 24 westbound as you head into the city from the Laverne and Smyrna area. We've got your traffic every 10 minutes every morning on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Good morning, everybody. 7:05 on Super Talk 99.7, the beginning of the third hour of Nashville's Morning News with Dan Mandis. I'm Brian Wilson in for Dan. Grandpa Dan is up greeting his new grandchild, and congratulations to him on that. I'll be in today. Chris Hand coming in at 9 o'clock, and we'll have a conversation with Chris in the second half of the 8 o'clock hour. Right now, there's a lot going on with regard to the President of the United States winging his way back from China. It's a 16-hour flight. He did a gaggle. That's what you call it, a gaggle. I don't know where it came from. I guess like a gaggle of geese. Reporters gather when the President wants to say something, and so he's gaggling on Air Force One. Let's listen in.
No, I mean, President Xi and I agree on many things. And we agree very much on trade. We're going to be doing a lot of trading. Our farmers are going to be taking in. I mean, our farmers are going to be very happy with the deal we made.
Is your instinct that he will put pressure, that he will try and get them to do more?
He's going to put pressure because automatically he'd like to see it opened up. He gets about 40% of his energy or his oil from that, from the strait. We get none. We don't need it.
Mr. President, on Truth Social, you said that President Xi had made a reference to the decline of the U.S. We didn't hear him say that. Maybe it was something he said in private to you. So what was it, first of all, that he said that prompted you to
He made a statement. It might not have been from him. It was somebody, but they talked about the decline. But he said today, and he said it very publicly, he said the U.S. was declining for the last 4 years. And he said what President Trump has done in the last 15, 16 months has been virtually a miracle. He said we have the hottest country anywhere in the world. But he said that it was a declining country under Joe Biden. He said we had a seriously declining country, which we did, with people pouring in from all over the world, from prisons and everything else. He said what President Trump has done has been a virtual miracle. It's the hottest country anywhere in the world, and it is. Yeah.
On a different subject, on Cuba, there's reporting that Raul Castro could be indicted by the DOJ, I believe. What does that mean?
Well, I don't want to comment on that. I'll let DOJ comment on it. But they need help, as you know. And you talk about a declining country. They are really a nation or a country in decline. So we're going to see. We have a lot to talk about on Cuba, but not maybe for today.
tariffs, Mr. President? Did you agree with President Xi to extend that year-long truce on tariffs?
We didn't discuss tariffs. I mean, they're paying tariffs. They're paying substantial tariffs, but we didn't discuss. You know, before I came along, it was the opposite. We didn't discuss tariffs. It wasn't brought up.
Mr. President, you said in January to us that you were going to bring up the expansion of their nuclear program. Obviously, they've got 600 weapons now, by the Pentagon's estimate, going to 1,500. Did that come up? Did you succeed in getting them into any form of arms control? Or remember we discussed New
Start? You're talking about China.
China.
We brought it up. The denuclearization. I talk about it all the time with Russia and with China. And it did come up. We did discuss.
And what did you conclude?
I don't know. I got a very positive response since the beginning. So, you know, we're going to be together 4 times, potentially, this year. We have the G20, which he wants to come to, which I'd like him to come to. It's going to be in Miami. It's going to be in Doral. And it's going to be, I think, very good. Much more important if he's there. And so you have the G20. We have one that he has, as you know, in November, in China. He's asked me to be there. I'm going to try and be there. And then we have another one on September, I guess, 26th or 24th, where he's coming into the White House.
I'm trying to understand what it is he committed to, if he committed anything.
Well, I don't want to say anybody committed, but we have a very good understanding.
So are you
the concept of denuclearization.
Denuclearization or just an extension?
Well, no, a denuclearization.
In other words, building down.
And you bring Russia into it also. But the concept of that is something would be very good.
That's the President of the United States gaggling. That's what they do. They gaggle back there. I've been on this plane, and this occurs right outside the door to the press cabin on Air Force One, which is in the back of the aircraft. It's actually the only thing that's further back than the press cabin on Air Force One is the galley. And but Trump comes to the door, and by the way, you know what's on the other side of that door? The Secret Service cabin. So they got us trapped back there. We're not going anywhere. But Trump comes back and he talks, and it's fascinating for me to see, like for example, one of his passengers, Sean Hannity, not a traveling member of the press corps, a guest of the president on Air Force One. Was in the background. Sort of interesting. So he's talking about how things went overall pretty well. He's been asked a lot of questions. You heard him talk about Cuba. There are some developments there. We'll get into that a little bit later in this hour. But it sounds like a pretty good meeting. He has done an interview with Sean Hannity about his meeting, and he has rather warm things to say about President Xi.
I think he's a warm person, actually, but but he's all business. He's there's no games. There's no talking about how nice the weather is. Oh, let's look at the stars. Let's look at the sun. No, he's all business, and that's, I like that. I mean, that's a good thing. No games. I say it about him, and I could say it about some, not as complimentary, frankly, for the most part. But I say about him that if you went to Hollywood and you looked for a leader of China to play a role in a movie,
central casting.
He's central casting. You couldn't find a guy like him. Even his physical features. He's tall, very tall, and especially for this country because they tend to be a little bit shorter.
Yeah, it's true. It is true. You do tend, as a tall American, you do tend to, when you go there, you notice that you tower over everyone. You'd be walking down the streets of Beijing, and you look around and you realize that virtually everybody that is on the sidewalk with you is about a foot shorter than you are. It is something that does really jump out at you there in China. But a good meeting. He talked a little bit about Iran with Sean Hannity because it came up. You see, this is really, this summit was the tale of two straits. The Chinese are very interested in what happens in Iran because they get a lot of their oil from Iran, and they want the Strait of Hormuz open. The other straits that they're concerned about are the Taiwanese straits, and that is a point of some conflict between the United States and China even now, what's going to happen there. But here is Trump talking a little bit about Iran with Sean Hannity and what he heard from President Xi with regard to Iran.
It would take one plane, 1 minute. That's all it would take. When you do that, you start off, that's a big statement to do that. Now, you also have bridges, you also have electric plants, which I think in many ways are worse because you can get the oil open faster than you can build a new bridge or build a new electric plant. But these guys should make a deal. I mean, only crazy people would not make a deal, but they should make a deal. And President Xi would like to see a deal made. He would like to see a deal made. And he did offer, he said, if I can be of any help at all, I would like to be of help. Because,
he did say that.
Yeah, he did say that. And look, anybody that buys that much oil has obviously got some kind of a relationship with him. But he said, I would love to be of help. If I can be of any help whatsoever, he'd like to see the Hormuz Strait open. He said, if I could be of any help whatsoever, I would like to help.
What has complicated things probably the most is the top three-tier leadership is wiped out.
It's gone.
Now you have a fractured leadership.
Yeah, but I think we have people that are leaders. I think they're much better than, I think they're much more reasonable. You know, if you talk about regime change, that's the ultimate. No, I said that is serious regime change, right? The third tier that we're dealing with now, I think they're actually much more reasonable and in many ways smarter than the first tier and the second tier, who are no longer with us.
Trump speaking to Sean Hannity about the situation in Iran and what she said to him, he said he'd like to see a deal. I think it is in the national security interest of China to get the Strait of Hormuz opened. Well, we share that. It's in the world's national security interest to get that going. And he would like to see that happening. In the meantime, he says China is coming to the United States to buy oil. Chinese ships will be showing up at the Houston harbor in Alaska and other places to load up on American oil. By the way, the price of oil went up a little bit on that news today. Other things going on. You see the pomp, the ceremony, the flag waving, the troops that are polished, spit polished and shined up. And, it's a big dog and pony show and a lot of ceremony and a lot of circumstance. But there's also around the periphery a little bit of chaos. I mean, for example, reporters are supposed to get into the motorcade with the president anywhere he moves. There's a small group that's supposed to travel with him. But they couldn't explain that to the Chinese security officials that were on hand.
Go. We gotta go. We gotta move. We gotta go. Let's go. We're going.
Look at this. That's
we gotta go, guys. Let's go. He's right.
We have to go.
We gotta go. Go.
We have to go.
We are going. Unbelievably.
U.S. press, we are going.
And basically, they shoved, the press corps shoved their way right past the security officials and got onto their part of the motorcade.
Gentle, but we are going. Don't run over anybody. Do not do what they did to us.
Listen, you would be surprised. You really would probably be surprised at how rough it can get when you're traveling in a situation like that. I mean, it was not uncommon for us to have fights with security people as the press corps. It was not uncommon for us to have, all kinds of problems, getting where we needed to go. And there would be people who didn't understand. They're not used to having a press corps that has such independence in China. So, their instinct is shut down the press corps. Peter Ducey had a couple of encounters and witnessed another.
We experienced some of that firsthand yesterday. Leaving that welcome ceremony, I was ordered onto a bus that then immediately left with nobody on it except for me and a driver that didn't know I wanted to get off.
Wow.
But after lots of shouting and pointing on the bus and off the bus, we got where we needed to be.
Secret Service had a little back and forth too.
They did. At a separate event, they didn't want to let one of the president's protective detail members bring a firearm in. More shoving, more shouting, but they figured it out.
Yeah, that doesn't work. Peter, as always, thank you.
Yeah, so there, chaos around the edges of all the pomp and ceremony. It is an I have actually been in situations where I got pinned to the wall one time by some Egyptian security officials at a Cairo airport event with Bill Clinton and Mubarak, and I got shoved around really hard because they wanted to separate. This is something that's not allowed in American press circles. Is they wanted to separate me, the editorial presence on the trip in the traveling press corps that day, from my camera crew. In other words, they wanted the picture. They just didn't want a pesky reporter who was going to ask questions. And we had a hard and fast rule that was never to happen. So we're going into this event, Mubarak and Clinton, and we're going in, and the security people let my camera into the room, and then they peel me off and pin me against the walls, and no, you cannot go in. And I was like, yes, I can. I'm never supposed to lead that camera crew. I go into that meeting, and they were rough. It got really rough. The only way I got saved was I started shouting at the top of my voice, which, it's pretty loud, to Joe Lockhart, who was across the room, Press Secretary Joe Lockhart. Joe, help me out here. And the Egyptian people were embarrassed because I was shouting. So eventually Joe motioned to let them, let me in, and I went in. And you know what happens in a photo op? You got your two principals that are sitting there. And when you come in, the sound people come in first and they go down low. And then the camera people come in and they stand above the sound people and to get a good picture. And then the reporters fill in around it. Well, I was the last one to get into that room because I'd been waylaid by Egyptian security. And I was catching my breath. I was still a little rattled from what had happened out in the hallway before. And somebody turned to me and said, Brian, they're waiting for a question. Oh, yeah. So I asked the question. I put on my best Sam Donaldson voice and said, Mr. President, what do you hope to accomplish with this meeting? It's a throwaway question, but we got an answer and we moved on. But it was rough. And I can tell you, this happens more times than you might imagine. Even though things look all polished and shiny around the event, around the edges of this thing is often a great deal of chaos. And certainly that was the way it was in China. It is now 21 minutes past the hour of 7 o'clock on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Coming up at the bottom of the hour, we'll have stories on a change in U.S. troop presence in Europe and an experimental drug showing promise for treatment of a deadly cancer. Those stories coming up at 7:30 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. It is 7:30, and I'm Jay Harper with your top stories. Traffic and weather, they're coming up. The president wrapping up his trip to China and his summit with the Chinese president, Xi Jinping. Trump says that Xi made commitments to purchase more soybeans from American farmers and hundreds of jets from Boeing, though China hasn't confirmed those deals. We hear now from ABC's Mary Bruce.
Throughout the trip, Trump laying on the flattery.
You're a great leader. I say it to everybody. You're a great leader. Sometimes people don't like me saying it, but I say it anyway because it's true.
President Xi striking a more serious tone.
双方合则两利。
When our two sides cooperate, both benefit, he said. When we confront each other, both suffer. China and the United States should be partners instead of rivals.
Back here in the U.S., the Pentagon has abruptly changed plans and decided not to send a brigade of about 4,200 troops from Fort Hood, Texas to Poland. The Army's 1st Cavalry Division and 2nd Armored Brigade combat team, they were scheduled to rotate in and replace an outgoing armored unit. The decision this week to cancel the move came as a big surprise to the troops and the commanders in the unit since they had been preparing to leave for several weeks. But ABC's Steve Bannon tells the ABC News podcast Start Here that the president, he's talked about drawing down American presence in Europe.
The president announced he was withdrawing 5,000 troops from Germany. And he said through both of his tenures, he's been very skeptical of using American power in Europe, often saying those countries need to take much more of the responsibility for their own security.
People around the country, they're hopeful for an experimental drug. It has shown very promising results, which may give some pancreatic cancer patients more time. It's not FDA approved yet, but more doctors around the country can now use the drug to help eligible patients after the FDA granted it expanded access earlier this month. Dr. Brandon Huffman, he's a medical oncologist at Dana-Farber Cancer Institute. He helped carry out those clinical trials. He was speaking to ABC News, and he explained how the drug works.
The cancer has these little genetic mutations. They're like little light switches. They're turned on, and the cancer is growing, it's spreading. And this drug, it turns off the lights, shrinking the cancer, helping the patients live better and longer.
That is the latest news. Traffic and weather, they're next. I'm Jay Harper, WTN News. We have a couple of injury crashes that we're dealing with, the first of which is near the airport, Briley Parkway at Volte Boulevard. Another injury crash reported in Antioch, this at Murfreesboro Pike at Pinhook Road. We've got your traffic every 10 minutes every morning on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
"35 minutes past the hour of 7 o'clock on Super Talk 99.7, Friday, May 15th. Brian Wilson in for Dan Mandis, who is off in Kentucky becoming a grandpa again. Grandpa Dan. We're glad for him. Very happy to be here today. A lot going on. I just witnessed this gaggle on Air Force One with Trump and the reporters and the traveling press corps who are with him there, a small group that travel with him on Air Force One. And he went 45 minutes. Sharp, engaged, typical Trump. And I happened to notice over in the corner, there's a clock. It would have been, at the time he did this thing, 3 a.m. on the East Coast of the United States. In Washington, it would have been 3 a.m. Here he is, half a world away, just cranking it. The guy's a beast. I don't know when he sleeps. I don't know that he does sleep. But one way or the other, they're now winging their way back after a very, very, very successful, I think, summit. They didn't get everything that they wanted, but they got a lot of things, and they moved the needle, I think, in a positive way. It really was the tale of two straits, the Strait of Hormuz, the Strait of Taiwan. Those were the two things that really interested the Chinese leadership in this summit. And overall, I think Trump feels like it was a pretty good meeting. At the same time that was going on, a big surprise, there was a U.S. jet, a big diplomatic jet out of Washington, sitting on the tarmac in Cuba. Yes, we sent the CIA director to Cuba for some high-level talks while the president is overseas in China. You know, a lot of people think that after we finish up whatever's going to happen with Iran, and I think that's pretty much over, we may try to focus on Cuba for a very short period of time. So this is what was going on. I think this is very interesting and could be the next shoe to drop in foreign relations around the world. CIA chief makes historic trip to Cuba as U.S. blockade chokes the island's energy supply. They don't have any gasoline or diesel coming into the island of Cuba. I mean, the last bit they got was like 730,000 barrels of oil that was sent to Cuba by Russia, but that's not happening anymore. They lost the oil that was coming to them from Venezuela. There you go. That's what happens. And now they're in a bind. So now, against that backdrop, you have the CIA director, John Ratcliffe, meeting with the grandson. He's a grandson of Raul Castro, brother of Fidel, former president. Let's see. On Thursday, the CIA posted photos on social media of Ratcliffe in the Cuban capital of Havana. No context. In a statement, the Cuban government said that during Thursday's meeting, both sides underscored their interest in developing bilateral cooperation between law enforcement agencies in the interest of the security of both countries, as well as regional and international security. Is it possible that we're going to resolve our long-standing conflict with Cuba Well, they don't have the Russians supporting them anymore. They don't have the Venezuelans supporting them anymore. They need somebody to help them out. And the United States is in a position to do that. It could be an historic moment, an historic opportunity. Here's another story on it. CIA Director John Ratcliffe, according to I can't read it. I'm sorry. AP. CIA Director John Ratcliffe met with Cuban officials, including Raul Castro, grandson, during a high-level visit to the island Thursday, Cuban and U.S. officials confirmed. Ratcliffe met with Raul Guillermo Rodriguez Castro, Interior Minister Lazaro Alvarez Casas, and the head of Cuban intelligence services to discuss intelligence cooperation, economic stability, and security issues. A CIA official confirmed the meeting to the Associated Press. Ratcliffe was there to personally deliver President Donald Trump's message that the United States is prepared to engage on economic and security issues, but only if Cuba makes fundamental changes. An official statement from Cuba's government noted that Thursday's meeting took place against a backdrop of complex bilateral relations. And while the U.S. stressed that Cuba cannot continue to be a safe haven for adversaries in the Western Hemisphere, the Cuban delegation insisted that the island presents no threat to U.S. security. The Cuban officials also took issue with the nation's continued inclusion on the U.S. list of state sponsors of terrorism. So, what is going on? And then there's another step here, another thing that's happening with regard to Cuba, and I can't quite figure out how these two things might go together, but let me just throw it out there. From CBS News. The U.S. is taking steps to indict Raul Castro, the 94-year-old former president of Cuba and brother of Fidel. In other words, the grandfather to the man that John Ratcliffe is talking to may well be indicted by our Justice Department. The potential indictment, which would need to be approved by a grand jury, is expected to focus on Cuba's deadly 1996 shootdown of planes operated by the humanitarian group Brothers to the Rescue. The Justice Department spokesperson declined to comment any further. So what's going on with Cuba? Is it possible that after all of these years of stressful relationships dating back to essentially the Bay of Pigs and the Cuban Missile Crisis, when Fidel Castro was in charge and dealing with the Russians and all of that. I mean, we've had very difficult relationships with Cuba. We used to have very friendly relationships with them. Wonderful. Cuba could be a wonderfully prosperous island nation if the communists would just get out of the way. There are enough people who've immigrated from Cuba to the United States who would like to go back and help develop their home country. There's all kinds of opportunity here for Cuba to be a sparkling gem in that part of the world and an ally of the United States. And, let's just see whether Trump can take advantage of it. If anybody can get it across the goal line, I think it's the two people, Marco Rubio and the President Trump, who is willing to deal with folks if they're willing to change their evil ways. We got a lot of things have to change in Cuba, but could it be that we, after all of these years, that we may be right on the precipice of a real great, strong, positive relationship with Cuba? Think of what will have happened in the first, 2 years of Trump's administration. If he is able to say, we solved the problem with Maduro, we have changed our relationship in that part of the world, we have gone in and kept Iran from developing a nuclear weapon, and have bombed them back to the Stone Ages in some regards. Their military will take years to rebuild, and we're maybe not even done with that yet. And then we pick up a warm and friendly and positive relation with the Cubans. That's a pretty good run if you can pull that off. That would be fantastic. And then we need, I think, a period of prosperous prosperity, quiet on the world stage, no wars, no fighting, just a time for America to reap the rewards of everything that has happened and try to get the economy back in better shape before the midterm elections. I think that is all possible and very interesting. But what is going on with this thing in Cuba? It is hard to understand, and see this happening and try to figure out what's going on. But something is happening, and I think it's positive. And I think at the end of the day, we're going to have a better relationship with Cuba than we've had since the 1960s. It is now 45 minutes past the hour of 7 o'clock on Super Talk 99.7. Brian Wilson in for Dan Mandis. Well, your forecast calls for a high today of around 81 degrees, currently 52 degrees in Metro Nashville. The weekend, I got to tell you, really looks nice. Saturday, partly cloudy skies, 85 degrees. Sunday, I'm going to be lounging by the pool, 88 degrees and abundant sunshine on Sunday. We have got some really nice weather. I mean, it's going to be pleasant, and then I think it goes up to the mid-80s, the upper 80s, and then drops back down to the mid-70s next week. So we're in for a good stretch of nice weather. Brian Wilson in for Dan Mandis, as I said. Dan will be back on Monday. A lot of things going on here in the world. The president winging back from China. We have a CIA director that is in Cuba. It is entirely possible that we're going to see some real changes on the world stage with regard to our relationship with China, with Iran, with Cuba. It is a remaking of the world order, and Trump is just on fire. He's really on a roll with that kind of stuff. So we'll watch all of that and see what happens in the days ahead. J.D. Vance, the vice president of the United States, couldn't go on the trip to China because, well, somebody has to stay behind and wear the daddy pants when the president's out of the country. So that was J.D.'s job. But he's been given the task, as you know, of trying to do something about fraud, waste, and abuse in America. He's now the fraud czar, in addition to being the vice president. And he was talking at an event yesterday about Medicare fraud and how they're going to pare back on some of the money they're sending to California because it's being wasted. Man, I'm telling you, the stuff that we're finding out about the level of fraud, waste, and abuse and taxpayer dollars, we're talking about real money here. We're talking about billions and billions and billions of dollars. Here's J.D. Vance yesterday.
So I want to be clear here. We're talking about withholding the Medicaid fraud enforcement payments that go to the state bureaucrats. We're not talking about withholding people's benefits. We're talking about turning off the resources that the state government should be using to police fraud. And then instead, we're going to use those resources ourselves because we're actually taking the fraud issue very seriously. But I do think it raises a very important issue. There are going to be some, I'm sure, some politicians who say what you're doing here is harming the Medicaid program. We're trying to save the Medicaid program from dysfunctional state bureaucrats. If you allow hundreds of millions, billions, even more money to go out the door, not to healthcare services for low-income families, but to fraudsters, you eventually are going to destroy the Medicaid program. So this is why we say red state, blue state. This does not need to be a political or a partisan issue. We want to work with you to eliminate fraud and make these programs last longer for the people who truly need them.
And the real question is, will this be the thing that propels J.D. Vance in advance of the 2028 race? In other words, A lot of people are looking right now and they say, well, who's going to be the nominee? Is it going to be J.D. Vance? Is it going to be Marco Rubio? Rubio's setting the world on fire in the world of diplomacy and as national security advisor, and Trump seems to like him. He's very much involved in what's happening in China, very much what's involved in Iran, very much involved in what's happening, as we mentioned, in Cuba. All of these things going on. So J.D. Vance is going to, his window and his thing is fraud and abuse. So is that going to be a winning thing? I think it is. I think it could be a big thing for him, because the one thing that really irritates Americans is that they send their hard-earned dollars to the federal government, and so much of it goes to fraud, waste, and abuse. I'm shocked, stunned, and amazed, really, honestly. As many years as I've been doing this, I'm still shocked, stunned, and amazed at how much fraud they are finding in our federal government. It's everywhere. California, it's in Florida, it's in Minnesota. Just the level is just astonishing how much fraud, waste, and abuse there is with taxpayers' dollars. If we could get rid of all the fraud, waste, and abuse, we might be able to, give people a tax cut. Wouldn't that be something? Now we're spending money on the war. We're spending money in other ways. And our gas prices are up at the moment, but I think that's going to be resolved in short order. So the real question is, who's going to emerge in 2028? Will it be J.D. Vance as the nominee, or will it be Marco Rubio? Both men doing a bang-up job. One thing I'm certain of, we got a deep bench. The other side, they're seriously talking about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez as the Democrat nominee for president. Kamala Harris is in fourth place, according to one poll. So they got nothing on their side of the equation. Let's call it 51 and a half past the hour of 7 o'clock on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
A change in U.S. troop presence in Europe. Also, the Census Bureau, they've released their latest city rankings, and there are some surprises. We'll have those stories coming up at 8 o'clock on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
57 minutes past the hour of 7 o'clock, Super Talk 99.7. Brian Wilson in for Dan Mandis on the Nashville Morning News program. Dan be back on Monday. Everything's good. I think if I could have one, everybody says, who would you like to sit down and have a nice dinner with, drink a beer with? I think there's a lot of people on that list. I'd like to sit down and have dinner with Elon Musk. I think it'd be fascinating to pick that guy's brain for an hour. But I think if you say anybody in the world, I think it'd be Sir Paul McCartney. I would love to meet Sir Paul McCartney. Big Beatles fan, have been for years. And the more I read about Paul McCartney, he seems like a pretty genuine dude. At least he's got good PR people if he's not. He says, however, that if you run into him, please put your phone away. Sir Paul McCartney has said that if he sees a fan reaching for his phone, he takes the, quote, radical step of asking them to put it away. The former Beatle, talking to the Telegraph, explained that agreeing to be photographed alongside admirers made him feel like a performing monkey. To avoid it, Sir Paul tells anyone who produces a camera, sorry, I don't do pictures. Wow. He said, I say to people, I don't want to do photos, and they say, why? And I say, I'll tell you what. And I go into this long explanation about how down on the south coast of France in Saint-Tropez, there's a man on a beachfront who has a monkey, and you have to pay to have your photo taken with the monkey. I really do not want to feel like that monkey. And when I take a picture with someone, I do feel like him. I'm not me anymore. I'm suddenly somebody else. So he won't do, and apparently Ringo won't do autographs. He quit doing autographs, and Paul McCartney won't do pictures. I have a friend I used to work with in D.C. who tells me the story about his brother and his wife, who were biking in California, just biking around on as tourists in California, and along comes a sedan, and the guy gets out driving the sedan, opens the trunk, pulls out a bicycle, and out of the sedan emerges Sir Paul McCartney. And they recognized him. Of course, how can you not know? I mean, he's one of the most recognizable people on the planet. And they said, Paul McCartney. He says, hey, how you doing? Sits down, chats with him for a while. Nobody's paying attention. Nobody around them has figured out that Paul McCartney is there. And he hung out with them and went riding bicycles for about an hour. And then, said, Tyria went back and they picked up his bike, put it back in the sedan, and took off. And they'd had an hour with Sir Paul McCartney, and virtually nobody else there picked up on the fact that they were within, a few feet of one of the members of the Fab Four. So I think he's a pretty good dude. But they don't have a picture. It's 8 o'clock on Super Talk 99.7. Time for the news with Jay Harper.
It is 1 minute past 8 a.m. I'm Jay Harper with your top stories. A forecast and a traffic report are coming up. The Pentagon, they've abruptly changed plans and decided not to send a brigade of about 4,200 troops from Fort Hood, Texas to Poland. The Army's 1st Cavalry Division, 2nd Armored Brigade combat team, they were scheduled to rotate in and replace an outgoing armored unit. ABC's Steve Bannon spoke with the ABC News podcast Start Here to explain the situation.
This is taking away a huge armor formation full of tanks and artillery, about as muscle flexy as you get when it comes to a military deployment abroad. And this unit also trains with our allies abroad, training with the Germans, training with the Romanians. So it's not just the actual presence, it's also that long-term relationship building between American units and European units.
He also says the decision was a surprise to the troops. They had been preparing for the move for quite some time. But the decision follows a separate Pentagon announcement a couple of weeks ago that over the next 6 to 12 months, about 5,000 U.S. troops would be withdrawn from Germany, with President Trump saying those cuts will go a lot further. In other news, the Census Bureau's latest population rankings find some communities shrinking and others going crazy. 5 of the nation's fastest-growing cities are in Texas. We find out more about it from Jim Ryan.
No other community in the country has grown more percentage-wise than Salina, a Dallas suburb that many Dallasites have never heard of.
When you look at the grand scheme of things, the possibilities we can say are endless.
Mayor Ryan Tubbs says his city isn't just a bedroom community anymore.
We have a whole lot of single-family housing growth, but our commercial growth is catching up to that.
In 2020, about 17,000 people called Salina home. The latest population count is 64,000.
That is the latest news. Weather's next. I'm Jay Harper, WTN News. Well, unfortunately, crashes building in our area. First of all, near Vanderbilt, we have a wreck. 21st Avenue South at Children's Way. A couple of injury crashes. Donaldson Pike at Royal Parkway. Also in Antioch, Murfreesboro Pike at Pinhook Road. That's been there a while. In Brentwood, we picked up a wreck. Old Hickory Boulevard at Franklin Pike Circle. And a one-car crash in Laverne. And this would be 24 westbound at Old Hickory Boulevard. We've got your traffic every 10 minutes every morning on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Good morning, everyone. It is 7 minutes past the hour of 8 o'clock on Super Talk 99.7. Dan Mandis is off today. I am your friend and radio buddy, Brian Wilson, filling in while Grandpa Dan goes up to meet his new grandchild in Kentucky. So happy to do that. Joan Jones off today. Jay Harper's in the newsroom pushing all of the news buttons, and Sam is doing the blinky buttons as well. Everybody's in their place. Gasoline prices. Oh, my gosh. Yeah, it is a serious thing for a lot of people right now, the price of gasoline. Let's just go through the numbers. West Texas Intermediate crude, $103 a barrel today. Brent crude at 107. Prices went up slightly on the world markets when it became known that apparently China is going to be coming to the United States to buy some of our oil and gas. Which means that China. Can you say it?
China.
I can't say it the way he says it.
China.
So, China. Is that it? That's pretty close.
Got to take the I, turn it to a Y.
Yeah, China. I can't do it. I can't do a Trump impression. I just can't. I don't know why. But anyway, yeah. So 103 for West Texas Intermediate crude, Brent 107. National gasoline by the gallon, national average $4.52. The Tennessee average is $4.12 a gallon. Compare and contrast that with what they pay in California. Wow. Can you imagine? I mean, as bad as it is, can you imagine being in California and you fill up your tank and it's $6 a gallon? $6.14 a gallon. I mean, you got to be up around $8 or so for diesel in California. So, I mean, it's bad, but it's not as bad here. I think it will. I really do. I've been following oil prices since I was a kid because I grew up in West Texas, and that's what you do there. You talk about the oil industry all the time, and I think it will come down quickly once we get out of Iran, and I think we're going to be doing that pretty quick. White House scrambles for gas price relief as the war drags on, from Newsmax. Trump administration officials scrambling to contain the economic and political fallout of the war with Iran. 3 people familiar with the White House discussions told Reuters as hopes for a quick resolution fade. I don't know that it will. I think we can still get out relatively easy and relatively soon. The U.S. President Donald Trump this week back suspending the federal gas tax, a step that would knock 18 cents a gallon off motor fuel prices currently averaging more than $4.50 a gallon nationwide. Once viewed by some White House aides as unnecessary, the idea is gaining some urgency as officials run low on options to show they are tackling rising costs, said the people who spoke on condition of anonymity to discuss sensitive internal deliberations. Within the White House, a consensus has emerged that with prices up 50% since the start of the war, Trump needs a visible consumer relief move now, one of his people said. $4 a gallon gasoline has been a level that triggers a public backlash and economic anxiety. That borne out since the war started. Look, we got to get it under control. I mean, other things are doing okay. I mean, we got pretty good employment in the country, and employment rate is pretty low. But inflation will run rampant. As I said back during COVID, and as I said during the Biden administration, about any time my microphone would be turned on, nothing runs through the economy in a negative way faster than high oil and gas prices, because everything needs oil and gas to get to market. And so everything goes up in cost when gasoline costs more because it takes more to get those goods and services to market. And so, yeah, that's something they got to get under control pretty quick. A short-term suspension of the gas tax would help a little. I mean, I'll take my 20 cents off if that will help. But the bottom line is they've really got to get that resolved in pretty short order. And so we'll see whether or not that can happen. Historically, $4 a gallon gas has been the level that triggers public backlash and economic anxiety. This is borne out since the war started as consumer sentiment recently dipped to a record low and inflation surged to 3.8%. Now, it's still not where it was when we had Biden in office and inflation ramped up to 9.1%. But more than 6 in 10 Americans say their household finances have taken a hit from higher gas prices, according to a May Reuters Ipsos poll that put Trump's economic approval rating at just 30%. Now Trump faces mounting pressure from fellow Republicans who fear economic pain caused by the war could spark voter backlash and cost the party control of the House of Representatives, possibly the Senate in the midterm elections. Administration officials have been poring over market data to gauge whether the national average price could climb to $5 a gallon, according to 2 people familiar with the discussions. 7 states have already surpassed that mark. AAA data now shows. So hang in there. I think we're going to be okay, but it could get worse before it gets better. However, all that being said, for the midterm elections, this is pretty interesting. Not doing it very well, more internal issues for Democrats hint at big trouble for the midterms. This is from redstate.com, talking about the Democrats in the midterm. This is pretty interesting stuff. As we go toward the 26 midterms, normally the party out of power, in this case the Democrats, would have the edge. But redistricting has made things much closer. On top of that, Democrats still have the problem that voters don't think very highly of them. As we reported, CNN senior data analyst Harry Inton explained that in addition to redistricting, which is likely to deliver more seats to Republican, their generic congressional ballot numbers have gotten worse since March, and they are now within the margin of error. The Democrats, I mean, we got our problems, but they got theirs too. Now the Associated Press dropped a piece about internal conflict among the Democrats entitled, "Inside the Furor Plaguing Democrat National Committee Leader Ken Martin." Saying the internal turmoil sounds pretty bad over at the DNC. Major donors aren't giving. Liberal influencers are publicly questioning Martin's refusal to release an internal report on the party's failures, and Democrat operatives have begun informal discussions about recruiting a new chair, even as most believe that Martin's job isn't in serious jeopardy ahead of the midterm elections. Well, if they don't do well in the midterm elections, he's toast. There's no doubt about that. But I'm telling you, Democrats are not particularly happy with their own party, and they are really a party divided. I mean, we are on our side to some degree, but I'm not like the Democrats are. Because the leadership is being driven by progressives. And America is not a progressive nation. So, you know, they keep pushing us further and further to the extreme left. They keep pushing the party to the extreme left, and at the end of the day, that's not going to play out very well for them. Time to take a quick look at what's going on with our traffic and weather at 15 minutes past the hour of 8 o'clock. It is 54 degrees currently in Metro Nashville, heading up to a high today of 81. The weekend looks great. High on Saturday, 85. Abundant sunshine, 88 beautiful degrees on Sunday. Really, you can't ask for better than that. So get out there and enjoy your weekend. Got to be by the pool, that's for sure. You know, I always worried when our back door to our nation, the borders, was wide open during the Biden years. And I told you every day, every time I could get on, I kept warning about, you don't know who's coming into this country. Because, you know, they're letting everybody in. They're not asking many questions. And then there were the gotaways more than 1 million people probably who got into this country. We didn't know anything about them. We know they got in because we could see them on our sensors, but we couldn't interdict them. We couldn't intercept them. We couldn't stop them. And they never came in contact with any law enforcement whatsoever. And I always said, if you wanted to do harm to this country, if you're a nation that wanted to do harm to this country, then this is the opportunity. You come in while the doors are wide open, you evaporate into the fabric of America, and you wait for that moment until you are asked to do harm. And I've always suspected that a lot of bad people got in during all of that. Now comes this very, very strange story out of all places, Alabama, Mobile, Alabama. From townhall.com. Have you heard about this? Unprecedented threat. Routine maintenance found an IED, an improvised explosive device, buried at the bottom of an Alabama dam. May 12th, workers doing routine maintenance on the Converse Reservoir Dam in Mobile, Alabama, found a grenade-type IED at the dam. The FBI squad came in to detonate the device in what authorities are calling an unprecedented threat. From NBC 15 down there. Mobile area water and sewer systems Wednesday announced that the Gulf Coast Regional Maritime Response and Render Safe team successfully retrieved and detonated an improvised explosive device found underwater at the Converse Reservoir Dam. The multi-agency effort included the Mobile County Sheriff's Office, FBI Bomb Squad, Mobile Police Department Explosive Ordnance Detail, and EA Bomb Squad, and the Daphne Search and Rescue Team. Well, bring the people from Daphne in. This device, a grenade-type IED, was initially located by divers surveying the dam for routine repair and maintenance. Following this discovery, they went out there, retrieved it, and blew it up, and it exploded. Our top priority is keeping your drinking water safe. This is an unprecedented threat, and we are fortunate that this device was discovered before it could cause serious damage to our water supply or harm to individuals. We are grateful for the professionalism and competency of our national law enforcement partners. Every dam and piece of critical infrastructure must be checked. It's an issue of national security. Well, yeah. I mean, are there others that have been placed at dams around the country? And if so, by whom? What was going to happen? Sit there and wait until you get the sign to cause mayhem in America? Then explode the improvised devices? I don't know. I really don't know what the plan was, and I really don't know if this is larger, but you got to ask your question now. If you're the Trump administration, are you going to start checking, the dams and other places around the country to find out if there are other things like this? And who did it? Who's responsible for this? Very, very concerning. Look, I believe a lot of bad people got in. I believe those bad people are still here. I think that they have infiltrated this country. They've absorbed themselves into the fabric of the nation, and they're just standing around waiting for their assignment. I think that's true of a lot of people who wanted to do us harm, and I hope it's not true, but I fear that it truly is. Let's call it 21 minutes past the hour of 8 o'clock on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Coming up at the bottom of the hour, the CIA director makes a sudden trip to Cuba. We'll let you know what that's about. Also, parents demanding that schools go back to the basics. We'll have those stories and more coming up at 8:30 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
It is 27 minutes past the hour of 8 o'clock on Super Talk 99.7. Brian Wilson in for Dan Mandis on Nashville's Morning News. And we're wishing Dan all the best as his daughter is about to provide him with yet another grandchild. So, hey, that's exciting for Dano, isn't it? Yeah, I'm really, really happy for him. We have here in Tennessee, we just had our special session. We got a new congressional map. It looks like that's going to stand for a little while. I mean, the Democrats have filed a lawsuit, and that lawsuit needs to get resolved very quick order if you're going to carry out all of this for the midterm election. Here's the latest on that from WKRN. A federal judge has denied an emergency request to temporarily block Tennessee's newly redrawn congressional maps from taking effect, at least for now. So Democrats said, we think you should give us an emergency restraining order to shut down this plan while we challenge it in a court of law. And a federal judge has said no. No, we're not going to do that. Didn't give us any explanation, didn't explain his ruling, just said, no. So that's a good sign that the redistricting is going to hold, although, who knows how long it's going to take to resolve all these court challenges. Around the country, this whole redistricting effort is helping Republicans to the point where Democrats are now beginning a little bit worried. Normally they would do very well in a midterm election. And now, for the very first time, they look at it and they go, I'm not so sure we're going to prevail. Boy, wouldn't that be something if that were the case. Listen, coming up here in just a short while, we're going to be talking to Chris Hand about what's coming up on his program. All that and much more still ahead on Nashville's Morning News. I am Brian Wilson, your friend and radio buddy, in for Dan Mandis. Time for the news with Jay Harper on Super Talk.
It is 8:30. I'm Jay Harper with your top stories. We'll get you a very nice weekend forecast and a traffic report here momentarily. CIA Director John Radcliffe, he made a sudden trip to Havana this week, putting pressure on the island nation that's already beginning to buckle under U.S. pressure. We hear now from ABC's Matt Rivers.
This surprise, unannounced trip to Cuba comes at a time of some of the worst tensions between the United States and Cuba that we have seen in generations, as a U.S. oil embargo continues to put near unprecedented strain on the island, choking off its fuel supply. Blackouts, which have long been a problem on the island, are now worse than ever. Just yesterday, half the island's power grid failing. And we know Donald Trump has threatened military action against the island for months now.
A potential settlement between President Trump and government agencies that he oversees, now raising ethics concerns. Sources telling ABC News that Trump is expected to drop his $10 billion lawsuit against the IRS in exchange for potential taxpayer-funded financial compensation for allies who claim they were wrongfully targeted by the Biden administration. Democrats, as you can imagine, they ain't happy. ABC's Rachel Scott has more.
Senator Elizabeth Warren calling it an insane level of corruption, dubbing it a slush fund for Trump's handpicked stooges to hand money to January 6 insurrectionists and his political allies. And former FBI Director James Comey, who the DOJ indicted just last month and who the president has repeatedly directed his DOJ to go after, weighing in too.
He's making sure that if you're part of Cosa Nostra, this thing of ours, you're on my team, I'll take care of you. I'll take care of you reducing your exposure. I'll get you free dough. That's a very dangerous message.
Trump started all this by suing the Treasury Department and the IRS for the leak of his tax returns during his first term in office. Sources also telling ABC News Trump was urging the Justice Department to pay him about $230 million for the investigations he faced during Biden's tenure. Parents, they're pushing back, demanding schools in some instances go low-tech. Here's ABC's Chuck Sievertson.
Parents across the country worried about too much screen time in schools are lobbying educators to go back to pencils and paper. Hundreds have signed a petition in Pennsylvania's Lower Merion Township School District near Philadelphia to allow parents to opt out of digital devices for their kids. School board members say it's not feasible to opt out of technology they say is essential to the curriculum.
That is the latest news. Weather and traffic are next. I'm Jay Harper, WTN News. We have a handful of crashes here. First of all, Donaldson Pike at Royal Parkway. That's right there by that intersection, I believe, where the Shoney's is or was. But anyway, I think you know where I'm talking about. Also, in Brentwood, we have a crash, Old Hickory Boulevard at Franklin Pike Circle. And on the East Bank, a crash reported now, Spring Street at Cowan Street. We've got your traffic every 10 minutes every morning on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
It is 37 minutes past the hour of 8 o'clock on Super Talk 99.7. You are listening to Nashville's Morning News with Dan Mandis, but I'm Brian Wilson. Dan will be back on Monday. And this is the time in the program where we get to talk, when we're lucky, to Chris Hand, who's going to take over at 9 o'clock. Good morning to you, Chris.
What's up, Brian? How you doing, man?
I'm doing good. We got to, by the way, also Jay Harper may jump in here, as well as Sam, who's pushing the blinky buttons. Good to have you in, Chris. Good to catch up with you. I don't get to talk to you nearly enough.
I know, man. I was actually texting with your lovely wife yesterday. She wants Mason, my producer, to put his fro in half cornrows. She was a big fan of that.
Is that Waiting, the movie with Ryan Reynolds, where one of the busboys does that?
We're calling it the Froth of July.
Oh, that'd be great.
We're gonna have some fun.
Speaking of the 4th, you and your lovely family are coming over to Watertown on the 4th, aren't you?
We are not going to miss the Watertown Squirt Gun Parade.
I'm telling you, it is a lot of fun, isn't it? I mean, I actually, the first time that I went to the parade, I was in it, and I got you just get creamed.
It's so much fun. The kids, I don't think the kids have ever had a more enjoyable parade, and the best thing is it's Maha friendly because they're not throwing red dye at the kids. You're just getting water balloons and squirt guns.
That's right. And so you anybody that's in the parade can be squirted by those who are attending the parade, and people line up. And I mean, by the time you get through that thing, you are drenched. The politicians are all drenched. Everybody has a good time, and it can get like, I saw a guy who just brought his hose to the side of the street and was just pounding people with cold water straight out of the hose.
Well, the kids are they're really excited, and they said, ask Mr. Wilson, is he going to bring the automatic squirt guns again?
I found them. I was cleaning the garage yesterday, and I found them.
Okay, perfect, because we were gonna bring our own arsenal if not.
Yeah, bring them, because I'm not sure I can find the charger for these things, but I have found the squirt guns. That's for sure.
Perfect. Well, we're excited, and just a humble brag on the kids. We had a baseball game last night, and I tell you what, Brian, young Bishop, who is 6 years old, he hit his first in the park home run.
Wow!
A 3-run dinger last night. And the kids did an amazing job. So just a little humble brag on Bishop, who's listening. Congrats, Bishop.
Well, congratulations for sure. By the way, I'm holding up to the camera. I don't know if you can see this or not, Chris, because sometimes the camera, when you see it, is behind schedule. But I have a plate with 2 Cabana Wife cookies on it.
Oh,
right out of the oven this morning. These are, I'm testing, and you know a little bit about this because your kids are the official test tasters of Cabana Wife cookies.
This is true. They love taste testing those cookies. We had a panel of kids. We even had a couple of the neighbor kids over the last time we did the taste testing, and they approved. I don't know if you knew this. They approved of all of them.
Yeah. No shock there. Well, this is a brand new cookie. Today I'm testing. It's a peanut butter cookie with chocolate chips.
All right, let's go.
Oh, I can't do it because I won't be able to finish talking. But I'm telling you, I had one last night, and they are awful. They are awesome. They are so good.
It almost sounded like you were going to say awful for a second.
No, they're awesome.
They are
Not
awfully
awful.
good.
They're
Awfully good.
You know, people don't know that Cabana Wife is a tremendous cook, and she's been thinking about starting a little business. We're actually going to be at the Glock store on the 30th. Cabana Wife
let's
Cookies
go.
coming to the Glock store.
This is probably the biggest selling point that the guys at the Glock store didn't tell me about, and now I'm going to have to work it into my ads. Also, I got a text from the wife. Bishop wants to know if you can bring a plate of cookies to the water gun parade on the 4th of July.
There will be, I guarantee you there will be cookies. There will be cookies.
Hey,
Anyway.
have you heard this story about the CIA going into DNI Gabbard's office and seizing documents, about 40 boxes of JFK and MK Ultra files?
Well, I've heard some differing accounts of that, and I haven't gone into it because I'm not sure which of those accounts is correct. Because you had Anna Paulina Luna and a bunch of people on Capitol Hill were upset at hearing this during the testimony during the Rand Paul hearing. I guess he came up.
It was with the CIA COVID whistleblower.
That's right. So he mentioned this fact, and then Anna Paulina Luna, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Paulina Luna. I get their names mixed up. And Tim Burchett and some other people got all upset about it. And then there are reports that, well, it really wasn't a raid, and there really was just a misunderstanding about the whole thing. What do you think happened there?
Well, I'm a little bit suspect about the timing, because just a couple days ago on MS Now, Barack Hussein Obama's former CIA director, John Brennan, was talking about how he still has guys inside the intel agencies that are a legion of gentlemen that are working to thwart the Trump administration. And when the Trump administration's pushing for transparency, and then you hear that the CIA is going into the DNI's office, taking documents, seizing, raiding, however you want to put it. You say tomato, I say tomato. The documents aren't there anymore. It was about 40 boxes of documents. I've come to find myself asking the question, who is in charge of these intel agencies, and how much longer are they going to get away with this?
Yeah, I think it's a fair question. I mean, the deep state is very real. It exists, and it is there. And it's in the intelligence community, I think, in a very big way. I really do. I've always felt that way.
So this was Anna Paulina Luna's comments on News Nation that really started the fire on this.
Get to the CIA whistleblower about the COVID-19 pandemic and Dr. Anthony Fauci's role in the cover-up. You also have some news coming out of the CIA that you'd like to share.
Yeah, so we were actually just notified that the CIA went in and took documents out of ODNI, multiple boxes pertaining to the JFK files as well as MK Ultra. The reason why this is troubling is A, there was an executive order that the president had directed the full declassification of JFK, but then also to the MK Ultra files, the CIA famously has said that, you know, all documents were released and other documents had been destroyed. So these are allegedly those documents that apparently never existed, and so very troubling. I did just talk to Chairman Comer, and we are sending in the next hour or so a preservation of documents request to the CIA. I have calls into the White House, to the director of the CIA himself, and so obviously as this develops, we'll keep everyone up to date, but strange times we're living in, that's for sure.
I mean, it is very, very strange. What are your thoughts?
Well, it is interesting because the CIA director, John Ratcliffe, reports to the director of national intelligence.
Correct.
So on its face, this doesn't make a lot of sense. Now, I heard that Anna Paulina Luna went over to the CIA, met with some CIA officials, and has sort of backed off of that a little bit. But I think there are real questions about these documents and what happened to them. And it certainly feeds into a real suspicion that many people have about what goes on with the intelligence community and the way they play. I'm not clear on exactly what happened there, but I did read that they sort of backed away from some of those earlier comments and took down some tweets that they'd put up earlier.
What are your thoughts on the MK Ultra program in general? I'd love to pick your brain on this, because I know you're all in on the aliens. Are you all in on the mind control? And, you know, the internet gets a hold of this and they're like, you know, all of these assassination attempts, they could have been MK Ultra guys. You know, you look at what happened to Reagan outside that same hotel. You look at what happened to RFK, and you have these lunatics that it doesn't really make sense that they're attempting these assassinations or completing them in RFK's case, RFK Sr. Do you think that some of these guys have been MK Ultra? Do you believe in the MK Ultra program? Where are you at on it?
Well, I don't know exactly where I believe. When you talk about the UFO thing, I am sort of interested in that, and I think there's been a lot of interesting stuff that's dropped into to the public debate on that in the last few days. Some of these documents that are out there, some others. By the way, there's a new documentary out by Jeremy Corbell, who's Corbell, I think his name is, and I think he's always been one of the people who's been telling us that this has been going on for years. But Congress has a list of, I think, 46 videos that they want. 46. They didn't get any in the first drop. Corbell went in this documentary, goes out into the desert and digs up something he buried 11 years before. And 8 of those 46 videos were things he's had forever, and he plays them in these documentary. So there's more stuff out there as well. As far as the MK Ultra stuff, I don't know, but I guarantee you, I don't know that we'll ever get the answers to this stuff, because it's sort of like the Epstein documents. They can unload millions of Epstein documents, and we're still not convinced that we have them all. I kind of feel the same way about the MK Ultra, JFK. You can keep bringing us documents. I'm just sure, everybody sort of has doubts that we've gotten them all, and will never be satisfied that we've gotten the truth there.
Do you think that this is like a new phenomenon? Because I've come to the consensus that in 2026, we're never going to agree on what the truth is. And even if you have provable, documents, evidence in your face, depending on whatever the case may be. It's JFK, it's UFOs, you name it. There's always going to be a contingent online, especially saying we're not being told the truth. This is a cover up. Are we ever? Is this a new phenomenon, or do you feel like this has been happening for a long time?
I think it's been going for a long time. I think it's probably a bit more heightened now than it has been in the past. And the bottom line is, we don't trust government.
Yeah.
That's the real bottom line on all of this stuff, is that we don't trust the government to deal with us straight and to tell us the truth. And so I don't know. I mean, I look at all of this stuff and I say, are we ever going to know the truth, or are we going to be satisfied that we've been told the entire truth ever? I'm not sure we can be.
Yeah, it's crazy times. Hey, speaking of not trusting governments, did you hear that the United States government seized everything that was given to any of the American press by Chinese officials? They took all like pins and papers and documents before they got on Air Force One. Is that normal protocol?
Well, I never had that happen, but I never did a Chinese summit. But I know they're concerned about things like, okay, so you got a little pen from some Chinese official. Is it a listening device? You don't know. So they got to look at that stuff. I assume it'll all be handed back eventually, but I think they want to take a look at it. Trump hasn't been on Truth Social a lot because they take away your phone when you get there.
Yeah, you get a burner phone, right? Because as soon as you step on mainland China, your phone is essentially hacked.
I have some experience in this regard. Have I ever told you that this takes about? I got just enough time to tell the story. I went to China on an adoption trip when I adopted my daughter, and when we adopted our daughter, and coming back, we went through Hong Kong, and while we were waiting to get on the plane out of Hong Kong, this pilot from the aircraft approached me, big Chinese guy, and he was going to take us to San Francisco, and he stopped and he wanted to engage with me about this whole adoption thing and how I felt about it. And I got the suspicion that the guy was not what he said he was. He was a pilot, but think about it. If you're a pilot and you want to be a spy, what a better job than to be an airline pilot. You fly in and out of countries all over the world. You see who's coming and who's going. And I think this guy sought us out to find out how we felt about our adoption process, because we pretty much figured out that the Chinese, while we were there, put it 2 and 2 together that I was a reporter.
Interesting.
We hadn't talked about it. So, and by the way, the guy showed up and checked on us as we came through security in San Francisco. He gave us his card. He emailed me when I got back to Maryland.
It's a little spooky.
1 year later, we get another email from the guy wanting to engage. It's just very strange. And I believe that their spying is very robust and in some of the places you might not expect.
Yeah, well, like mayors in California.
Yeah, exactly. I also once did a story where there was a thing happening where our pilots went down on an island controlled by the Chinese, and it was a big story for several days and a bit of an international diplomatic incident. And I was working for Fox at the time, and when I would go out on the front walk in front of Fox to do my stand-up, there would be a Chinese guy there listening to what I had to say.
Really?
Yeah, it happened like 2-3 days in a row. Third day, I turned to my camera crew and said, "Watch this." And I walked over and I just walked up to the guy just right on the street. And I said, "Can I help you with something?" And the guy jumped. He looked at me like he'd been shot and he ran away. But they, I would say probably about 90% of the people who work out of the embassy and the Chinese embassy in D.C. are spies.
Do you think that these same Chinese officials ever attempted to contact your daughter over the years?
I don't know.
I'm just curious. It's just interesting.
She's not said anything, but I don't talk to her as much as I used to. And she's now an architect and working out of Toronto. So.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah. So I don't know.
Heck of a gig.
So, real quick, tell us what's on your show today.
Well, we're going to be recapping the trip with China. I heard you covering the gaggle. I got some of that as well. We also got the interview with Sean Hannity. That was pretty interesting. We also have redistricting news. Kamala Harris was on a town hall. I don't know if you saw this, where she said, Democrats, we have to get together. There's no bad ideas like making D.C. and Puerto Rico a state, packing the Supreme Court, amnestying illegal aliens. And I think to myself that those are terrible ideas, but it's actually quite in line with the Democrat Party. We'll bring you the latest on redistricting and more, and we'll be taking your phone calls all day here on The Chris Hand Show.
All right, that's straight ahead right after this program ends at 9 o'clock in the news with Jay Harper. It is 8:52 on Super Talk 99.7.
Coming up at the top of the hour, the Supreme Court ruling about an abortion medication that will be of interest to many. Also, prepare if you are going up in the New York area and expect to get on the Long Island Railroad this weekend. You may have some trouble. We'll get to those stories and more at 9 o'clock on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.